to start with. The one here in the city of Belmont is especially complex. You have parallel interceptor lines. Think about those as almost like a main trunk and branches from the tree coming down to that trunk that are coming to the plant. You have multiple lift stations. Many of those lift stations pump from one to the other to the other. We call that like a daisy chaining effect. And so whenever you have development or demands put on the system, really anywhere in the system, it has cumulative downstream effects that may not be recognized immediately without some form of a hydraulic model or visual twin. So that's why it's really important. And just to kind of benchmark as well, most cities your size, this is almost a requirement to be able to operate that system with any level of confidence and be able to be proactive in the decision making that you're faced with pretty much in every council meeting about development or impacts of new demand. The other thing I want to point out here too as well, as I mentioned, we've completed the AIA project with you. In fact, I'll probably be back up here in a month or two with Placervia talking about the work we're doing on the comprehensive land use plan. And so all of this work is all interconnected together. And so again, this is a really important piece of a lot of things that you're doing. So why create the hydraulic model? I'm going to hit a few of these really quickly. These are some main themes that I want you to kind of think about as we're going through this presentation. One is level of service targets. Another way to say that is standard of care. Okay? So as we're going through this, you're going to hear me hit that theme many, many times. What is the right standard of care or level of service for the city of Belmont? I can certainly give you some recommendations. I can help you benchmark against other communities. But what's right for Belmont is really what's right for Belmont, that you need to kind of understand that and decide. The other thing too as well is we're going to talk about weather events, meaning rainstorms. And I'll describe those as 2 and 5 and 10-year events. And one of the great things with this model is that we can simulate those types of storms, how that affects the sanitary sewer system, how other or new development affects the sanitary sewer system, and so we can give you an idea of what those impacts are before experiencing those. The other thing that we're going to really hit on, that third theme, is what we're going to call extraneous flow. And what that is, another term for that is inflow and infiltration. And basically this is the rainwater that is getting into your system during those events. And every gallon of rainwater that gets in your system during that event is 1 gallon of capacity for future development that's basically being taken away. And so how do we prioritize trying to remove as much of that extraneous flow as possible for the least amount of cost? So those would be the 3 themes I'll certainly hit on in this presentation, and think about those as we talk through it. So I'm going to hit here with the executive summary right up front, get to the chase. On an average daily flow, a day like today, 70-some degrees, it's bluebird day, beautiful weather, your system is performing as designed. If every day was like today, you would have some minor capacity challenges, but not major capacity challenges. Under a 2-year design storm, and what do I mean by 2-year design storm? Well, statistically speaking, that would be a storm event that we would expect to happen statistically about once every 2 years. And what does that look like? Well, that could be 2 inches of rain in about an hour period, or that could be maybe 4 inches of rain over the course of the day. That is the kind of definition of a 2-year design storm in this area. During those types of events, which unfortunately seem to occur more often than once every 2 years, right? During those events, this is when you start to have some capacity issues and challenges in the system. And this is where we begin to start talking about what is the right level of service or standard of care that we need to manage to. There are some capacity upgrades at flow concentration points that I'll hit on, but just in general, think about lift stations, gravity interceptors, and then obviously the treatment plant. This is ultimately where the flow gathers into one spot and is basically being transported to another. That is going to be that first kind of bottleneck or choke point inside that gravity system. So, what does average daily flow capacity look like? So you can see the legend on the side over here, a lot of green on this map. Green's good. These are all the gravity lines. You can see the purple squares, which are actually the lift stations. They are numerous throughout the system. In many cases, they're manifolded together, meaning more than one lift station is pumping to a single force main. There are other lift stations that quote-unquote daisy chain, so one pumps from one to another to another. And so that complexity adds quite a bit. The other thing to think about too as well, I don't know if this has got a laser pointer or not, I don't see it, but if you look in that area right around where it says like Hampton Inn Lift Station, kind of down from there above Hall Lift Station, that is where some of those parallel to interceptor larger diameter lines live. That even under average daily flow, you're actually in capacity, final capacity. And I would also call that also minimum standard of care. So when the state of North Carolina is looking at permitting your system and working with your system, in the perfect world, we would want to see these lines no more than 80% full, or 80% capacity being used during a day like today. And again, down in this area here, what I'm going to call Central Belmont area, you see the topology, a lot of green, the purple or kind of hot pink lines you see there, those are the force mains. You can see where multiple lift stations are dumping into.
So those aren't necessarily bad, those are just the force mains.
They're just force mains. They're just a different color to designate that that is a pressure versus the green being gravity. Yeah. Then we come down to the southern Belmont area, and this is the Morgan's Branch and Reflection Point lift station. I've highlighted those two in particular. I'm going to go just a little bit here, a little bit deep here for a moment. One, there's a screenshot of software called Lift Command that your staff is now using that tracks flow through every lift station. That was part of this project. And you can see how they're daisy chained together. And so flow that maybe comes in at one lift station, it ends up in another and in another lift station. When you start to see yellows and reds show up on that kind of dashboard, what it's telling you is with tributary flow. Now, what is tributary flow? That is the flow that comes when you turn your sink on, you wash your dishes, your normal day-to-day activities. That is flow that is in the gravity system today. But then you also have what we would call promised flow. So this is maybe a development that you've approved, or planning board's recommended, it's come before council, you decided it's the right thing for the city of Belmont, and you have basically promised 100,000 gallons of average daily flow for that development. It's not in the system yet, but it's going to be in the system. We account for that in here too as well. So think about that as sort of a reserve or sort of this future flow that we've got to account for. So now we actually have a way to track every project that is under consideration, that is approved or not approved yet, that may be requested flow. We can see all of these developments, how they interact together, what impacts they put on the system, and ultimately, do we have capacity to be able to handle it. At Morgan's Branch and Reflection Point today, based on promised flow and tributary flow, we're basically at capacity on those lift stations. That is sort of the first choke point. Now, you're operating properly and adequately today, but as more of that promised flow comes on, it is going to start to encroach upon the maximum capacity of those particular lift stations. And I believe that we actually completed a study of just this south area not too long ago, and I think that was one of the findings that was brought out there. All of that work has been incorporated now into this entire citywide model. All right, so let's move along to a 2-year storm, a 5-year storm, and a 10-year storm. And forgive me, I like to talk in analogies or metaphors sometimes to try to make the complex maybe a bit more understandable and simple. But ways to think about this, that standard of care, if I'm designing a subdivision or some development and I'm preparing my stormwater plans, generally speaking, I'm designing to a 10-year storm. I'm trying to basically say this system will be adequate to handle that type of rain event and not stress the infrastructure that's there. I would consider that to be a pretty high level of service to manage to for a sanitary sewer system. Many systems try to manage to that. I can tell you, most systems that I work with don't actually ever achieve. But that's certainly a lofty goal to manage too. And I kind of think about it as almost like in your vehicle with your fuel tank. How much do you have in reserve? If something were to happen, we're stuck in traffic and I'm just having to sit there and idle, I'm not really going anywhere, how long can I stay there? Or if I have to take a detour, how much capacity, how much fuel do I have to be able to burn? Down to a 5-year storm. That's kind of sitting at a half-year tank. That's actually a pretty good goal to manage too as well. A little bit larger storm event than that 2-year storm. But honestly, in your model, whenever I model that 5-year storm compared to the 2-year storm, it's just a little bit more capacity needed, right? That jump from where you are today at average daily flow to 2 years, that's where the big jump actually occurs. And it kind of makes sense. Generally speaking, when you have I&I, that first inch or two of rain, that's what's really impacting the system more than anything. And then down to the 2-year storm, I've got that sort of at a quarter tank, maybe the little fuel lights come on. And so what that's telling you is, you're still okay, we have capacity, we have the ability to continue to travel, but any kind of further distress, and we may be running on empty, right? And so I want you to kind of think about level of service or standard of care in those terms. What is that right balance of investment to reach that standard of care versus under larger weather events that you may actually experience SSOs or sanitary sewer overflows? And that's obviously what we're trying to prevent, or prevent things from backing up in homes, whatever it may be. So, one of the things that we do in the model is we have a lot of flow monitoring that took place in your system. And we're actually capturing how the sanitary sewer system performed over the last couple of years during some of these events. And to my point, last year in September and August, you actually had a 2-year event in September and you had a 5-year event in August. And so, again, statistically, you shouldn't have another 5-year event for 5 years. Realistically, you may have one this year. It just depends on weather patterns, right? And during that time, you can see, under that September 24, we actually had 3 reported sanitary sewer overflows. This is where rainwater got into the system, combined with tributary flow. It outran the capacity of the system to be able to handle it, and so wastewater and rainwater escapes the system. And ultimately, that's not something that we want to have happen, particularly with any regularity. Now, if I go to Hurricane Helene and you have SSOs there, everybody had SSOs. We're never going to manage to be able to handle the worst of the worst disasters or some of these largest events. Everybody understands that. It's not practical to be able to design a system to handle the worst of the worst. But these storm events, 2 and 5 year, these are pretty regular occurrences. And ultimately, I would suggest, as you consider this, that this may be the right level of service target that you would want to consider to try to manage to.
Are you saying for like a hurricane level storm, that's kind of an outlier and you carve that out in these types of data?
Yeah, we carved that out of that data, right? We actually modeled it, and we modeled it because what we want to see is, does that digital twin replicate what we actually witnessed during that storm event? And that's what we did here. That's part of that calibration process. And so what that means ultimately on that hydraulic model is that we have a high level of confidence in its predictability. So if I model a certain storm, or if I say, hey, here's this new development that's looking to come in here, what impacts will it have there and downstream? And we have a pretty high level of confidence that what the model results are is probably what we would expect to see in your system in real life. Yeah. Great question.
So can you go back 1 second?
Sure.
Just a quick question. So you isolate September and August. What about the other months? Were there no no periods of like a 3-year or a 2-year or 5-year in that, or
So, great question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Okay,
yeah.
fantastic. So we actually put flow monitoring devices in the system in strategic places. And this is where we had overlap of storm with those monitoring devices in place. So there may have been other events that we just didn't have data for because the monitoring devices were not there. So
The
again,
inception date of the study was not told. When did you start collecting?
it was about a year ago at this time, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Don't hold me to that. I'm working on 2 or 3 different ones that tend to blend together sometime. But yeah, I think it's about a year ago. Did that answer the question?
It did. I was just curious because as you said, it was about a year that you guys started. I just would have thought like more months, we would have seen some data or something like that as it
Yeah.
pertains to that.
Well, I'm not sure if he's saying those are the only 2 months they had data for, it's just that that happened to be when the big storms hit.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
We have big storms in other months outside of September and August of 2024.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So generally speaking, when we put those monitoring devices, because there's a cost associated with that, obviously, those are rented, and generally we like to have them in the ground 2 to 3 months, and we'd like to have 2 or 3 events during that time period.
Gotcha.
Once we get the
Yeah.
data, it's like, okay, we've got what we need, let's pull them out, and not just leave them in the ground.
No, I understand that. I just didn't want the perception to be that just this occurred just in 2 months, not.
So,
multiple.
yeah,
These 2 months were the 2 months that you had the devices.
And the event occurred.
Right.
Devices.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to go back and look at data and et cetera, but yes, I'm sure you had more events. And again, whenever you do have an SSO, your public works staff, I mean, they have to report that and record it and try to estimate how much maybe escaped the system. That's part of that regulatory environment that you're in that has to be reported to the state.
But you got what you needed, really, just from these 2 events, because
Yeah.
you're able to gauge the performance of the.
That's correct. That's correct. So when we look at the system and I model out that 2-year storm capacity, actually, you know, where the model predicted the SSO would occur, that's actually where it physically occurred at, whenever it happened. So again, that gives us really high confidence in the model. What you can see here, and it may be a little difficult, but you can see some of the shorter little red lines and maybe like a little yellow line around Cason, up at Pebble Creek. Those are where the pipes basically are surcharged, or they are full. So think about, you know, an 8-inch pipe or a 15-inch pipe or whatever, this big around. It is literally from top to bottom, full of water. It is running as hard as it can go. And at some point, if it continues to build up, it'll actually back up into the manhole itself. It'll surcharge that manhole. And then at some point, if it continues, then it will surcharge and actually come out of the manhole cover and escape onto the ground. That would be considered an SSO. Again, in a perfect world, you would want that pipe to, generally speaking, never exceed 80% full. As I move on down to what I'm calling the north central area, this red line is coming down where it kind of says Dixie Lift Station. If you work your way back northwest from there, that is one of the paralleled intersectors. And what do I mean by that? So at some point in time, you laid a rather large diameter pipe because it's collecting a lot of the flow and directing it to the wastewater treatment plant. The capacity of that pipe was basically going to be exceeded and you needed more capacity. So you actually laid another pipe beside it and paralleled. And so you effectively double the capacity of that line and being able to double the amount of transport to the treatment plant. And even with that happening today, under a rain event, those lines are ultimately surcharged. Now, during dry weather, as I showed earlier, they're fine. Okay? Keep that in mind as we continue through this. This is happening during those rain events. That might be 5, 6, 8, 10 times a year that this may happen, depending on the type of events we have. The other red lines you see there coming down to Clay Street, lift station, Abbey Place, those have some of the same issues. Now I'll come down to Belmont, kind of what I'm calling the wastewater treatment plant area. Same kind of thing, you can see that same pattern forming again, right here from where it says City of Belmont wastewater going kind of northwest again. That is additional lines in that area. They are surcharged underneath that 2-year storm event. And again, we've actually witnessed this physically during those events on the ground, but we're also seeing those same results inside the model, which gives us a lot of confidence in the data that we're getting. As I continue down to what I call the South Point Ridge, Belmont area, a little bit of red here and there. Something to consider, but not major issues. And then I come down into the South Shore area, and notice here, there's just a little bit around Morning Branch, maybe just one little pipe there around Overlake. When I'm seeing just one pipe kind of surcharge that way, this calls for pause, just a little due diligence on it. But again, what I'm really looking for is this long extended period, from pipe 1 to pipe 50, and everything in between being red. That's really where I'm seeing, that's where I get a little bit more concerned. So something interesting here, notice, there's a lot of this that is actually force main. Again, that's sort of those pink lines, right? So those are pressure pipes, so they're always surcharged, they're under pressure. The green lines, but you're noticing you're not seeing a lot of those green turning red. Well, part of that is, this is part of the newer part of the system here, right? So as pipes start to get older, the older infrastructure that's out there, it starts to deteriorate. And this is what's letting in a lot of that infiltration, groundwater into the system. There's other things that we would consider inflow, so think about that as surface water running in. But generally speaking, in some of these newer areas, those are pretty much new pipes. They're very much watertight. They've been designed to a high standard, as they should be. And so this area is not really contributing a lot of that I&I issue. But every bit of flow, every bit of demand that happens in the south area or anywhere else in the city, it eventually has to get to the treatment plant, either the Belmont treatment plant or to Two Rivers treatment plant. One other thing I do want to point out, and I believe you guys are in conversation with Charlotte Water now for maybe having them treat your wastewater. Is that correct? Okay. Be aware, that treatment is paid for by the gallon, or by thousands.
We're very aware.
And so every gallon of extraneous flow is going to run through that meter the same way as that tributary flow on the dry day, right? That's going to drive cost. It's costing you money now at your treatment plant. Maybe a bit kind of hidden, maybe not quite as in your face, but when you actually have to write a check at the end of the month for rainwater, you're going to see the direct cost of that pretty quickly.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
And you might eventually touch on this, and I apologize if.
No, go right ahead.
For these SSO events where they're 100% full,
Mm-hmm.
what type of, because that's a lot of water pressure, how quickly does that deteriorate a pipe? Because you're talking about these are new,
Mm-hmm.
so they're fine.
Yeah.
But how quickly are they going to not be fine?
So those pipes were never designed to be able to, they were not designed to be pressure pipes or to have that kind of internal pressure on them. So it does put stress, like structural stress on it. Some materials will perform better than others. PVC, for instance, it's got some elasticity, it can handle that a little bit better. But where you have older infrastructure, cast iron, vitrified clay, those kind of things like that in the system that already have defects and cracks. You can imagine something that's already structurally compromised and having cracks, having more pressure put on it, it's just going to open that crack up even more and exacerbate that problem.
Which we have a fair amount of that material, right?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. In the older parts of the system, that is correct.
And one more question on that map as well, because you touched on it at the beginning, but this includes approved developments as well in regards to your model, or is this what is built today? Because McLean, for example, has retail that's supposed to be coming in, restaurants, grocery, whatever have you. Is that included in this?
It is. Thank you for that question. That's a very important point, and I apologize. I should have made that more clear or stated it. This is accounting for everything you have approved, even if it's not tributary today. But we know what that demand is, what that projected demand is for that. So yes, this would be with future flows
Okay.
that have been approved as well.
But it's just,
All types of uses, right? Your point.
yeah,
Yeah,
but it's,
Commercial.
residential, commercial, industrial, whatever.
but it's just approved. It wouldn't necessarily be like, let's say, a sketch plan that we have submitted to them.
Correct. That would be we kind of put those in a little bit different category that we kind of call requested. And so this under consideration, but we want to capture that requested up front.
Yep.
Because again, you know, I put myself in like the developer shoes, right? If I'm coming in, I'm thinking about doing a project with you, hey, could you, you know, if this project moves forward, do you have capacity? And well, how much do you need? 100,000 gallons a day? I can basically put it in the lift command now, I can put it in the model and go, we're good. Right now, we're good. Now, 6 months from now,
It could be a different story.
it could be a different story, because if we've approved something else that was in the requested category, you know, there's still some opportunity there. But more importantly, if you come in today and say, we don't have capacity today, we've already promised every bit of capacity. You know, I can tell you from the developers and others that we work with, yes or no, I don't really care. Just, I need to get to one of them as quick as possible. Right? If it's no, let me know no, and then I'm just gonna move to something else. So again, I think this will help that dynamic and that communication back and forth with staff and development requests, being able to answer some of those questions a lot faster.
Thank you.
No, great question. Keep non-mobile. This is great, fantastic. So development impacts. So to that point, this segued in actually really nicely. So one of the things I would encourage, and this is kind of with your staff and then you guys as well, as you're considering development, is this question: will the development exceed this level of service goal that I'm going to encourage you to set? Is, you know, whether it's 2-year, 5-year, minimum standard of regulatory standard, whatever that decision is your decision to make. But that's the first question you need to ask. If I approve this, do we have the capacity to stay inside of our goals? Is it going to require downstream capital improvements? You know, we could do it, but it's going to require either upsizing a line or upsizing a pump station or whatever. And then where does that cost sharing occur? Is that something you cost share with the developer? Is that something that goes back, comes back to the enterprise fund and we just self-fund? Is it, you know, something that we're going to account for in future rate increases? Lots of options, all have different outcomes, none of them are wrong. But it's ultimately a policy decision. And then we can talk about alternative analysis. And I want to dive into this one for a moment. So I think this is a development that's under consideration. Looks like a really nice development. Maybe some representatives in the room tonight from there. But this is Crescent Mixed Use. And I think it's in the consideration process, not approved, I believe. Right now with the topology, meaning how things kind of connect in your system, Crescent Mixed Use would actually, I'm going to walk up here and point to this.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, it would kind of flow this path right here, going down to the treatment plant. So as you can see in here, if your level of service goal is a 2-year design storm, we are already exceeding capacity there. And Crescent would just add to that. Now, that's not to say that it's going to make it 10 times worse. It's certainly not going to do that. But it's just going to make it a little worse than it is today. And but if you're standard of care, that level of service is regulatory, minimum standard, the green maps that I was showing in the beginning, Crescent could go there, and if that's your standard of care, then it would be fine. However, during a 2-year or 5-year rain event, we could probably expect some SSOs, surcharge spikes, everything happening through here. Crescent's not going to be the cause of it, but they're going to be a contributor to it.
Because it's already over.
It's already there. It's already there. That's right. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't do it? No, it certainly doesn't mean that. You know, there's also alternatives. One, obviously, we can come in and upsize lines here, and I'll give you a different strategy before the end as well. But another option right now is we could actually reverse flow on this pipe, connect gravity to this pipe, and redirect flow in this manner and totally bypass that. Now, is that the right answer? It is a answer, you know, an answer. It doesn't solve your long-term problem, but it certainly keeps that development from contributing to an already stressed area. So again, there's, you know,
Which you still need to address anyway.
you still need to address, right? You know, this doesn't make the problem go away, right? This doesn't make it go away, but it doesn't exacerbate it.
Right.
It doesn't add to it.
What would that do to the highlighted, portion?
It has adequate capacity to be able to handle that flow. That is correct. So, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, sewer systems are complex. If this development were, you know, over here, there may be a totally different answer. If it was over here, there may be a totally different answer. There may not be a solution that gets it anywhere else. You know, there's always a solution of, you put a pump station here, bypass everything, and just push it straight to the treatment plant. I would not suggest that as a viable one, but again, there's a solution to every problem. It just takes, you know, investment, it takes money. And ultimately, what is the long-term goal? Is it to do these one at a time, or is it to basically build a robust system that can handle the type of growth that you're expecting or that you desire?
And all these graphics right now are based on the 2-year event, right?
This is based on the 2-year event, right? And if I could be so bold, to me personally, this is my opinion, I'm not an elected official and not my place to make that decision, but that is what I would consider a very reasonable standard of care. It is not a high-level standard of care, but it is a reasonable one that I think that you could manage to, and you would basically minimize those SSOs with any regularity. Not to say that you still could not have some. Obviously, again, a large storm comes through, it's going to even exceed, right? Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask that question, but in your experience, when you're dealing with other municipalities that are maybe facing similar growth trends as we have for some time now, and certainly that's expected to continue, I mean, what do you see as kind of the bogey for them? Is the standard of care with most of similar sized municipalities with similar challenges, trying to keep their infrastructure, how to keep pace with the growth? Do you see more 2-year standards, more 5-year standards? I don't imagine you have too many that are willing to end up to go 10 years, but.
Yeah, I think, I think that 2 and 5 year is sort of that standard of care that we generally see. Again, many will say we want to manage to that kind of 10 year, but I've yet to really see anybody actually manage to that. That's maybe more of an aspirational goal. But again, at that 2 and 5 year, the frequency of those events, you know, if you're not managing to that level, you're going to be responding.
Well, no, I would think at least 2 year, but to me that just seems like kind of bare bones.
Yeah.
Do you have a graphic that shows 5 years?
I did not include it in here, but I do have that information.
Okay.
And by the way, I'll kind of do this with hand, but if you think about maybe like a bar chart, right? If this were like a 2-year storm event, like so this is average, we don't have any SSOs or this amount of flow. 2 years sort of like here, 5 years like that much more.
Yeah, because
It's not like twice as much.
You mentioned that before, yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, so to go from a 2 to a 5 year, not it's more, but it's not a factor of 2,
Right.
multiples. So I want to hit on this just really quick, as I mentioned before, where the development is actually occurring. You know, you can have impacts right at the spot where it connects them, right? So these are your resident service laterals, manholes, these are lift stations that pump to another manhole to go here, to go to another lift station. But it's not just right here that we're looking. Each one of these highlighted areas are those concentration points. That flow is going to end up there. Rainwater's getting in the system, it's going to end up there. Tributary flow, actual wastewater flow, it's going to end up there. It's going to become that concentration point. This is generally where you start to see your issues show up. Again, think about it as like a tree. These are the branches coming in. This is that main trunk. This is where everything kind of congregates. So let's kind of look at this as an example. And I've just kind of thrown up on here just for no particular reason, like approved developments or whatever, just so there's something to relate to. But don't take that as like they're causing an issue or these are problems. And this is sort of a little schematic on the lift station. They don't actually work this way, but it's a good way to show it. But I look at tributary flow. This is that bluebird day, right? This is a day like today. It's not rained. System's working great, Public Works is happy because they're not having to respond to emergencies or having SSOs, that kind of thing. Then I look at extraneous flow. And extraneous flow, if you can kind of see here, it's eating up that much capacity, because you really need to account, because you have extraneous flow. You need to account for that potential flow, just like you count for promise flow for a future development. It's part of the system. Then you have your promise flow. Well, you can see here with extraneous flow included, if I'm managing to that kind of 2-year storm, at this point, with everything I've got promised on this example lift station, I've reached my capacity. I really should not approve, anything else until I've made some investment to increase capacity along this particular concentration flow. And then if I've got other, like requested flow, again, I'll just say the Crescent, no particular reason here, just as an example. Requested, under this example, if a developer came in and they were requesting flow, I would have to tell them, I'm at my limit. I really don't have capacity, not without some kind of major capital investment. Now, when I talk about extraneous flow, I want us to spend just a few moments here on this, because I think it's really important. There is an amount of rainwater that is going to get into the system. In fact, I won't go into the whole formula, but it's like 2,000 to 10,000 gallons per inch mile diameter per mile.
Got it.
Yeah, got it. Right. This is where I'll take the engineers now.
We'll take your word for it.
Take my word for it, right? You Google it, right? Google it. But ultimately, there's some that's just going to get in the system. It's going to happen. You're going to have SSOs on occasion, not because of rainwater, but because something gets clogged in the line. Y'all got what's called fat, oils, and grease, the FOG program, right? Where you're monitoring grease traps and et cetera, because grease gets in the line that can block. Yeah. So SSOs are not always just caused by capacity. Sometimes it's by blockage. But what's happening here in this extraneous flow? Each one of these things that I kind of list out here are potential areas for water to get in the system. Some of these are not owned or managed by the city. Cleanouts in someone's yard. Roof drains maybe being connected to the system, so then every bit of water that hits the roof comes down the gutter, and somehow or another it got inadvertently tied to the wastewater system instead of to the drainage system. The cleanout, somebody mows over it with a lawnmower, knocks the cap off, all of a sudden now I've got a 4-inch pipe that may be in a low area in the yard, and it's acting as a yard inlet. It's just draining everything in that yard, okay? Other things that you'll see happen, older infrastructure like this here, there's a crack in the pipe. Where the sewer lateral comes in, maybe that sewer lateral has become disconnected or wasn't connected really well to start with, and it's letting water come in. There are several places where we can address extraneous flow. And every gallon of extraneous flow that I can get out of the system is 1 more gallon for that next development. 1 more gallon that can be used for capacity. And ultimately, it's 1 less gallon that you're going to be paying for at your treatment plant or at, a provider like Two Rivers or Charlotte Water. So how do we go and tackle that? How do we go address this extraneous flow? So one of the things that I always say here, everybody wants to find the magic bullet, right? The silver, the one great big hole, right? We're just going to go find the one great big hole, we'll fix it, and that'll solve 80% of problems, the 80-20 rule. Unfortunately, in my career, I've only sort of seen that happen one time. I was working in Beach Mountain, and we found a pipe that was crossing a creek, and every time the creek would get up, it would just pour into the pipe. And that's the one time I can say I found a silver bullet. But the rest of the time, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one thing, it's thousands of little things that are all contributing. However, uncapped cleanout taps, sewer laterals, those are easy to detect through a method called smoke testing. And your staff has actually done that in the past. Some may have seen it when it happened. And so anywhere smoke is getting out of the system, that's where water is getting in. I've participated in hundreds of those, and I've seen it where the town looks like it's on fire. Because in fact, you need to send out notices to citizens that we're going to be smoke testing in your area because they're going to see smoke. If their gutter is connected, they're going to see smoke coming out their gutter system on their house and think the house is on fire. So again, there's a public campaign that needs to happen if you're gonna do that. But smoke testing is really inexpensive. It will identify some of your major contributors. And the fix for that clean out cap, is go to Lowe's Home Improvement, spend $4 on the plastic clean out cap and put it on there.
So I have a question on that, because, my mind went immediately, it's like, okay, low-bearing fruit, what can you knock off to start helping, right? But to your point, multiple cuts, right, are kind of the identified issue here. But let's just say that uncapped cleanout, and I'll use the neighborhood I live in, for example. I mean, there's gotta be like half the houses on one street that have ran over with a lawnmower, right? So if you think about that and apply that across the entire municipality, I mean, are you not looking at potential
Major reduction.
measurements? So
Yeah.
as far as maybe this might be towards staff, like, what's our policy to that? And who is truly the owner of that? I guess it's the homeowner, right? It's not necessarily the city at that point.
That's
It's on the
correct.
Property.
That's right. That would be, so again, there's some education that comes along with that.
Yeah.
Or again, there's cities I work with where we will come out and fix it for you. That could be a policy. Or it could be, we've identified it, you need to fix it. And if you don't fix it, then maybe there's some penalty that goes along with that, right? So,
So we have a policy.
I think we've done smoke tests in the past, I don't know when the last time we have done that.
Because to put it in perspective, in my old community down here in Aberfoyle, it was an issue. And Overlake, it's an issue. So just in two places I've lived here, I mean, again, that's not counting all the other neighborhoods around the area, Eagle Park, Bellmead, I mean, all these places. I mean, I don't know, it might be interesting for us to, low-bearing fruit, just go around and see,
Do we have a policy for that?
For cleanout?
Yeah.
ensuring that
Just
the
ensuring
cap
it's-
Those periodic testing.
Not that I'm aware of, I don't know what kind of policy we would have, other than keep the cleanout on your cleanout. Keep a.
I mean, should there be some sort of penalty for?
Well, I think that's something I'm trying to suggest, because if that's long-bearing fruit, to your point, that could give measurable results, I think that's an easy one to try to correct, right?
it is certainly low-hanging fruit. It's the least, least costly. Again, it's a lot cheaper than replacing miles and miles of really large underground infrastructures, right?
And this is something you can determine with that smoke test, right?
It can help you identify where you need to focus in on. And I'm gonna go to this in a minute, but we've already, through the modeling, I can tell you the areas that you probably need to go smoke test at first.
Okay.
Right, because I'm able to see that rainfall-derived influent infiltration. And I can definitely tell you the areas that you would want to go into.
Thank you.
No, great question. Again, this is why it's so important that you guys, get to be able to ask these questions, because a lot of this is really policy-driven. What is right for government? How do you address this?
Let's say we do the smoke test and we determine X number of houses need one. How often do you come back to that?
Well,
Like, say, 10 years from now?
Right, because it can take just a random Saturday to rerun it over, and, we've got a problem.
That's right. So what, data-driven, right? Again, this is where the model's nice. Again, you start to see flows creeping back up in certain areas. You now have the model, you can kind of narrow down what area that's coming from. And then you may want to go do a small smoke test in that very defined area. So if you fixed it and then all of a sudden, a year later, it's kind of creeping back, it's a pretty inexpensive way to do some assessment. The second assessment that you can do, and best practice, is that you would CCTV, basically there's a little camera that kind of crawls its way up the sewer pipe, and you're doing a video inspection of that pipe. And it's looking for these connections or laterals that maybe have water leaking around it, or these cracks. And whenever you have a structural defect in a pipe, even if it's not happening, again, many times we're running that up and I'm actually watching the water just pour in. I mean, it's no doubt this is a contributor, right? And, but in other cases, you can see the staining, you can see the residue of past, even if it's been dry for weeks, you can still see the issues. There is a scoring methodology, it's called NASCO. It's a national, so you can compare yourself to any other city, in the nation that uses that. It kind of ranks severity, and we can actually somewhat calculate the potential I&I removal. I did a project like this down in Southern Pines, and we were able to come in and quantify how much I&I was coming into those pipes, and then basically make recommendations of, is it CIPP, slip lining, being replaced, pipe bursting, what is the right type of treatment to repair that pipe? And then basically we're able, the model was basically able to show what that reduction would be, and we hit it right on the nose. I mean, we were down to like 56 gallons per inch diameter mile, which is extremely low.
Is it possible to do these tests on all types of pipe? My recollection was that I think, I'm familiar with us doing smoke tests and CCTV, but I feel like it wasn't something that, there were still areas that we were uncertain of what was going on there, what were the issues, so I'm not, is there certain types of pipe where that might not be feasible, or?
Well, the good thing about the model is I can tell you where to prioritize. So again, I wouldn't recommend running a CCTV camera up a 5-year-old PVC pipe you just got put in the ground. If you've got issues there, that's a whole other thing. But again, the model is telling me which pipes are really having the most issues, where we're seeing most of the areas of water getting in, so we can help prioritize that. As a best practice, you should be doing that to about 10% of your system every year anyway. That's a pretty standard practice. So every 10 years, you will have ultimately looked at every pipe in that system, and the oldest data would be 10 years old. What I like to recommend is that you don't just do it across the entire system, but focus that in the areas where you know you have aged infrastructure. So I might be coming back to those more than every 10 years. I might be coming back every 5, and not focusing on some of the brand new infrastructure.
Does your study get to the point of telling you, like, how attributable I&I is to our capacity issues versus, say, the pipe size or the capacity of the lift stations? I mean, is that too fluid to?
No, so there was a chart that I had, and I kind of pulled it out of this deck because I didn't want to get too deep on you here, but in some of these events, put it this way, and a dry day, a day like today, this pipe may have, I'm just going to use some random numbers for example, so it's specific, okay? Let's say that it's got 10,000 gallons flowing through it during the course of the day. During a rain event, in some of these cases, we're seeing these pipes have over 100,000 gallons of water running through it. So it's 10,000 gallons tributary, 90,000 gallons of groundwater. It's that level of magnitude. We kind of talk, you'll hear peaking factor sometimes, and there's kind of, it's really what we actually call R value. It's kind of rainfall, not to know RDI. But, you know, peaking factor, think about it in the morning, you get up, you take a shower, maybe, you're doing your daily routine, so you kind of see a peak in flow maybe at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, everybody's getting up. And then the flow kind of drops off during the day. And then at night, it comes back up because everybody's in showers, cooking, washing the dishwasher, washing clothes. And so you start to see a peaking again. This is sort of that curve, that pattern that happens during the day. And so peaking factor can certainly, that's part of it, is talking about these peaks of high usage versus the average across the entire day. But when you start talking about rainfall, you kind of use this R value. And so above that peak, if that's the normal peak, and a rain event is happening at the same time as that peak, again, we're seeing some of these that are taking that 2.5 peaking factor and turning it to like 19. So it's substantial. But kind of moving along here, want to be respectful of time. I know you've got a long evening. We dove into a lot. I'll hit these last couple of things. But if you can remove that extraneous flow, that same situation under that example I had a minute ago, tributary, promised, requested, all of a sudden now, I have capacity even for that requested flow because I've removed that extraneous flow. And again, it is a substantial amount. This allows us to be more proactive instead of reactive. You know, what you don't want to do, what you don't want to encounter is have unknown consequences, right, or surprises. We thought we had capacity, we put it online, and now all of a sudden we're having issues. Now you're under the gun to kind of fix it. So again, let's get ahead of that and let's plan. It allows us to have better conversations with, with our development partners, talk about some options. I'm going to throw a couple of those options out here for you. None of these are right or wrong, But these are some strategies I've seen other communities do. Before I get into that, this area here, northern Belmont, I've labeled this as priority 1. This is a major contributing area of I&I to your system. If I were going to smoke test, this area here is one of those areas I would certainly start in. Secondary area, this is what I would call priority 2, which is this area in here. And this area over here is technically priority 1 as well. So kind of along this River Ridge, Lofton Park, Dixie Lift Station area, you kind of see that darker brown. That would also be one of the first areas I would start looking at smoke testing and see what kind of results we get. And then that kind of Clay, Hall, Lift Station area, Abbey Place, this would kind of be that second priority. This area here, I've got this as minimal I&I. These are not major contributing areas. Now, certainly, it's not a bad practice to go down there and find one or two clean outs or something that may be letting in, but it's not a major contributor. We're not seeing that the flow that's coming from there is mainly tributary flow. So on the conclusion side of that, I said I'd throw some options out here to you. So again, as I started out with, one of the first things I think you really need to do is really kind of set a policy that you want to manage to. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Is it that minimum regulatory standard? None of those are wrong. They have different investment requirements with it. But setting that level of service to manage to, that's going to be extremely helpful for your staff. To know what your expectations are and to know what those limits are when they're having conversations about development or about an industry coming in or whatever. We can all speak the same language. We all know what we're shooting for, what that goal is.
You mentioned before that you see most municipalities managing to that 2 or 5 year event.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to push a little further on that, do you see one more than the other, or because again, 2 just to me kind of seems managing to the minimum.
To your point, that bar graph that you showed us, where you had the measurement devices in place for, I think it was August and September,
Yeah. You have
Like
one or two more SSOs versus
for the 5 year.
For the 5 years.
So is it safe to say we have more 5-year issues?
the issues are just exacerbated, right? So I'm trying to think.
Meaning if we're going to Jason's point, if we're going to try to plan for something, set a policy, in my mind, it would make sense to do the 5-year if we're having more of those 5-year issues.
Guess it depends on the location, right, as well? or-
It is. It's again, it's localized. It's those concentration points, and again, you're going from statistically speaking, you're going to have more 2-year events, right, than you are 5-year events. Those are less frequent weather events. When that 5-year event happens, you're seeing the compounding of that 2-year event blended in with 5-year. If you could remove all the way back and get a lot of that extraneous flow out, all of a sudden, that 5-year event,
The delta between the 2 and the 5 becomes less.
that little delta,
Yeah.
when you take this off, if you were to clean all that up, and then all of a sudden, any other that's getting in there that typically doesn't get in there in the 2-year, it's only this big. So that's what I was saying, having a target at 5-year is fine, but what you're really trying to get rid of is that first couple of inches of rainfall that's getting into the system. If you can manage that, then I think you can probably manage the other. The 5-year, if you're managing to that, you're gonna see a little bit more red lines. It's gonna be more capital projects that you've now set a standard that you say, we don't want any red on that, right? We wanna try to resolve all that. It's gonna give you a little bit higher target. You're gonna definitely be more resilient in storm events, but it's not gonna be a factor, a much larger factor than if you can manage to that.
So you'll also be more prepared for growth.
More prepared for growth, right?
Yeah.
Now you've got,
So I feel like the 2 years is kind of like a Band-Aid where.
it's just giving that capacity, right? It's every bit of that's capacity.
And just kind of piggybacking off of Jason too, like particularly for us, since Belmont, primarily if you think about the East Belmont area, we've got the rivers, right? So when you're thinking of these overflow incidents, we make state news when it gets into the rivers, the Catawba River, the South Fork River. Both rivers ultimately feed into Lake Wylie, which is a water source. The Catawba River is a water source. Down south, further down into South Carolina, it's a water source. So when we're talking about 2 years and 5 years, would it not be safe to say, if you're a municipality in our unique situation that's on these rivers, we probably need to be looking at this a little bit differently than a city that wouldn't be, right?
Good point.
Yeah, again, from an environmental standpoint, yes. I mean, again, that's a higher standard of care, right? Higher standard of care. Does your community, is that something your community desires, right? Is it the right answer for Belmont? And, again, somebody could say, oh, well, we never want a gallon get out. Well, there are costs that come with that, right? Again, all these are really good ideas until the money has to start to flow, right? So, again, that's something you can kind of take into consideration. What is the right balance of standard of care for Belmont? But certainly in your situation, being near water, water source, that has maybe a little bit more bearing on your thought. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to beat it again, extraneous flows consuming capacity. And, there's two ways to get capacity. Is one, remove demand that shouldn't be there to begin with. Or you just remove that extraneous flow. Or you just build bigger things, right? So I'll go back to my last analogy there again on fuel tank. If I was putting fuel in my tank, and it was also leaking out of the tank at the same time, do I just put more fuel in the tank, or do I fix the leak? And so here, I would certainly say fix the leak first, and then if the tank's still not big enough, then we can upsize the tank, right? Or we can add a reserve tank, or we can put some jerry cans in the back, or whatever it needs to be, right? To get more capacity. But fix the leak first, because I think you can solve a lot of your problems, a lot of the challenges you have right there. Development varies by location. In some of these areas, quite honestly, really throughout the entire system, everything is ending up in the plant. And so even if it's happening down here, it has a direct effect even miles away in the system. So everything needs a little bit of level of due diligence. The nice thing is now with the model, due diligence is put it in, it go, and the model spits out the answer. We can tell you those answers really, really quickly. That's important, again, for the development community, because they're going to want to know yes or no as quick as possible.
So you can do that we've referenced this one project in particular several times today, it's on the slide, the Crescent, but Crescent is not the only one. And so while we might be focused on that and the alternatives there, if something comes along and say, an assisted living facility at the Methodist Church, we can plug that in, or a hotel up near the hospital, we can plug that in and get these answers.
That's right. An industrial site, some manufacturing, whatever it may be, if they know what their demand is going to be on the system, we can put that demand in. I can immediately tell you that demand at this level of service target, it will exceed it or it will stay inside of it. And if it exceeds it, this is how much it exceeds it. And these are potential alternatives to be able to make it happen. What are those investments that need to happen? Is it upsize the pipe? Or could you go into a discussion around, you need 100,000 gallons. I've got this basin that has a lot of I&I. If you can help offset some of the cost of reducing that I&I to the tune of 100,000 gallons, then that just got you capacity. That is a really good win-win for you and for the developer or whoever that person may be, because again, I don't want to go put a third 24-inch line paralleling to be able to serve that, because all I'm doing is just adding capacity to treat more rainwater that I'm going to send to Charlotte Water or somebody else I got to pay for. I'd rather get that out of the system. And the cost to put pipe in the ground versus the cost of removing extraneous flow, your highest return on investment is removing that extraneous flow. It will be much less than putting more pipe in the ground. And I'm going to speak here, last kind of thing, from the other work that I'm working with Laservia on right now in your comprehensive land use plan. If you look at the remaining developable land that is in Belmont, there's not a lot of green space left, right? You've got opportunity for redevelopment of taking a single family home and now all of a sudden it's, apartments or something.
Let's not go crazy.
Just touched the third rail, I just about made it, and didn't touch the third rail. But, you know, the point being is, at the end of the day, you know, you're not like, we've got thousands of acres that's gonna develop in the future, so we might as well just start putting a lot of big pipes in, because we know it's coming. You've kind of already built out a lot of your jurisdictional area. So the need for these really large capacity pipes and pumps, et cetera, there's not gonna be a real future need for them. The only reason why they're there now is because of the extraneous flow that's sitting in. That's really the reason why the need's there. So hopefully this has been really, really good. The last thing I'll close on, again, I'm gonna use that
It's been
word.
informative, I'm not sure I can say it's good.
Yeah, well, it's more,
Good to know.
more
Good to
knowledgeable,
know,
right,
yes.
more knowledgeable. But yeah, the key here on that last one is systematic. This is something that you just need, it needs to become part of your regular operation and maintenance. Smoke testing, CCTV, continue to find this. You know, this is not something you're gonna go out next week and they're gonna find a big hole in the system, fix it, and all the problems are solved. This is just gonna be chipping away at it, year over year, removing that out. You know, the AIA work that we did, we've identified a lot of these pipes that are aged, that have issues. So again, we've got a lot of low-hanging targets that we've already identified that we can start hitting now. Let's measure and quantify how much we're pulling out of the system each time we do this. And I think you can start to see these investments that you make are paying a real dividends for the city and for the future. And with that, you guys, great questions. Do you have any others before I leave you?
Okay, I do have a quick one for you. Now, I know when we're looking at these maps, we're looking at the existing capacity for the existing line. So with this model, we have our existing treatment facility in operations. Once Charlotte Water goes into operations, does it materially change what you've shown us? Okay, so there is no major change once we shut the valve and it goes across the river?
No,
Okay,
then it just becomes how much is Charlotte Water, you know, if you.
charging us, right?
Right, charging you, and then, you know, I'm assuming they're gonna have a allocation for you, right?
Yeah.
And if you exceed that allocation, that starts to become an issue.
And then as far as the modeling itself, so just kind of looking to the future, so I think this is great that we've done this, there's a lot of useful information. Is this something that we just keep maintained through the years and future councils, future staff? Or is this something that we need to come back to this at a certain point and redo it? Is that?
The perfect answer to this is the digital twin. Every time you add a pipe to the system, I wanna put it in the model right now. And so again, this is something we do this type of modeling. Yelm, Washington State's one of our clients. We do this modeling all over the United States. And again, that's one of the things that we preach is we actually manage these models for the staff. And I want data coming in. You know, I won't go deep here, but you know, your crews go out and do drawdown tests. This kind of talks about pump performance. Because again, pumps will start to deteriorate over time. They don't run as well as they used to, and maybe they're not performing. So again, there's a lot of data that they're already collecting. This now just gives us a place to actually put that data and make use of it, right? Of actually having actionable intelligence from that data instead of just putting it in a book and going, well, I captured it in this over here. We might use it one day. No, let's use it real time.
But if we had like an big I&I project in like the northern part of the city that took years to accomplish, we would want you to come back out and put your flow monitoring devices back in the pipes to see what we have taken out of the system, because we might turn one of those pipes from like red back to green.
Back to green, that's right.
Project.
Yeah, that's
So
what
we could use them.
Yeah, it's just a constant loop, right? It's exactly what we did in Southern Pines. Because again, if you're gonna go make that investment to remove that extraneous flow, I wanna find out did the money pay for anything?
Yeah.
Did it actually do what we thought it was going to do?
The last one I have, Jim, is just in regards to the modeling. So today we looked at the 2-year, which I think is great. But to Jason, I think Charlie's point, it would be possible to get kind of the same charts for the 5-year, right? You know, maybe it's a little excessive to go to the 10-year, but I think that would be important for us in regards to determining what the policy should be, whether it be 10 years or 5 years, right? So I think that would be kind of beneficial for us.
And to your point, does anyone know how often we hit the 10-year mark in a year?
With the 10-year storm or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, certainly you hit with Helene, I mean, that would be, everybody calls that a 1,000-year storm, right? You know, again, I really don't like that nomenclature, because again, it
Yeah.
implies,
It
Well,
should be
it's once every 10 years,
years,
right, yeah, but again, they see it more
Yeah.
frequent than that. But that's the language that's used. I would have to go back and look at weather records to see how many 10-year storm events you actually had. I don't know that off the top
The
of my head.
numbers that you captured in that August, September, is that excessive? Based on what you've seen? Or is that-
Excessive amounts of SSOs?
Yeah, yeah.
It's, I would not call it excessive. I've seen much worse.
Okay.
I've seen cities much worse. But by some standard of care, there's a reason why you have to report to the state, right? I mean, again, in the perfect world, you would not have an SSO. Certainly not one caused by, a natural event, a regularly occurring natural storm.
Yeah.
Right. Helene, different story, fats, oils, grease, a blockage, not great, but things happen, right? Just like you get a flat tire on your car. You have brand new tires, you run over a nail, you still get a flat tire every time. You can't stop that kind of act of God. But again, when you're talking about a somewhat regular rain event, you could expect to see, some frequency. If you're having issues, that's probably something you want to take into account. When I look at the amount of extraneous flow, in some of those areas, it would be considered excessive, right? So, again, the good news in that black cloud is you got a target-rich environment, right? You've got a lot of opportunity to pull a lot of flow out.
Given, in your study of all of this, and you saw, we've talked a little bit about the southern part of the town on the peninsula, and we had the earlier study done there, and as a result of that study, there's a moratorium in place. And I know you've said repeatedly that there's no right answers, only policy choices, but based on everything that you've seen and your own statements about this being a multi-year effort, do you see anything that would require a moratorium and any other areas of the city at this time?
So, opinion, right?
Sure.
Opinion. I don't think you're at that point. I certainly have worked with towns where the state of North Carolina has issued a moratorium because that city did not issue one. And so, again, I have seen municipalities in much, much worse shape, operationally speaking, than you are here. But what I will say is, I think I used it in the slide there somewhere, is every development is individual, and the due diligence on each one of those, because you don't have a lot of excess capacity, you already have some of these, choke points, if you will, these areas where concentration of flow is. You really, again, we can take that really quickly, drop it in the model, and tell you this one is going to be highly impactful, or this one is going to be minimal or no impact. Or again, here's a way to lessen the impact.
Is that how you ranked as far as North Belmont, Central, and South? Is that how you got to that ranking there?
The ranking there is really more about that, where we're seeing the major contributor of I&I. But again, any I&I that I'm removing, particularly like, let's say in Central Belmont area, every gallon I move there is getting mingled in with flow from the south and from the north and everything else. So it's all of it coming together.
Yeah.
So again, every gallon, no matter where I take it out of the system, in particular those main parallel lines coming to the plant, that's just one more gallon of pressure, one less gallon, of pressure on that line. That's going to could cause an SSO.
Just maybe one kind of comment too, because to your point, kind of in the opinion, right, in regards to moratoriums and stuff, but I do know when we went up to the state, Jason, Jim, when we talked to some of the state legislatures, they applauded us for doing a self-mandated moratorium. Because there's a big difference from doing it yourself, and then by the time that the state's coming in, the requirement and taking over. Because at that point, then you're at a point where it's really bad, right? I mean,
It is. I mean,
so we just need to be clear, you really don't want that to be an option when the state comes in for a moratorium, and that's why we were applauded by state legislatures by moving forward and imposing it on ourselves to try to get this stuff corrected.
That's right, and again, I'm gonna say grace given when you're actually making progress, even if you're still having issues, but you're showing progress, that you're addressing these issues. Even then, that gives you a little bit of grace. Again, I work with a particular resort community, and they were put under moratorium, and they couldn't issue a building permit for years. I mean, that's a pretty major hit to your economic development of your community, particularly if you're a resort community. There was a community actually where my father lives, and they were adding on, building a new sanctuary, and that city was in a moratorium. And that new sanctuary did not hook to the sewer system because it had, restroom facilities in it. And until that was resolved, they had a brand new church building that could not be used. So again, those are extreme cases where the state's got involved. You never really want to get there. So again, I think taking in some of the things we talked about tonight and doing that, that's just showing goodwill, for the future. It's showing good stewardship of the system you've got. I mean, your sewer system is a major asset for your community. Development does not happen without it. Growth does not happen without it, particularly dense growth. And so, taking some approaches there to solve some of these challenges, I think is certainly the right approach, and never let it get to the state to make those determinations for it.
Any other questions?
Just one quick one. So again, I'm going back to that priority list.
Sure.
For South Belmont being at the bottom of that priority, did the moratorium have a play in that?
No, again, that's really more, great question. Again, that's more of Morgan's Branch. There was a concentration point there. If you remember back on this slide, I could go back to it, I had like 2 lift stations that were there that were like already a constriction point. So that was part of it. But then every bit of that tributary flow, again, not a lot of I&I. It's mainly just real wastewater flow, the actual flow you want in the pipe. All that gets pumped back up into central Belmont and then dumps into the gravity system. And that gravity system in that area is already overstressed. So even though that it's tributary wastewater, the wastewater you want to collect down there and transport, is getting transported downstream from that through a pipe that is out of capacity. And so that's one of the reasons why. But the main reason was primarily some of those lift stations were already undersized. And they're, again, without getting complexity, a lot of those are manifolded together, a lot of those daisy chained together, and so there's a lot going on down there. It's a pretty complex part of your system.
So would it make sense to tackle central Belmont first? If it's
North Belmont.
I would tackle, priority 1.
Yeah, that north
Alternative.
and that northeast section.
Belmont's number one.
Yeah.
I would assume is it because that it's an older infrastructure up there in regards to the large amount of I&I that we're seeing in North Belmont?
I think that's probably what the major contributing factor to it. It's just a lot of age. Again, the smoke testing.
Yeah.
You keep your fingers crossed there. That again, maybe you find just a lot of those 1,000 cups, right, that are $4 fixes. That could go a long, long way in that area. Can't promise you that. But when you look at the graphs like for I&I, you have inflow and you have infiltration. And without getting deep here, when you see this immediate spike, it starts raining, and then all of a sudden the graph, the flow just jumps. That's telling you that that's just rainwater running in really, really quickly. And we're seeing that kind of pattern in the flow up there. When you see it rains, and then it gradually goes up, flow goes up, and then it stays up, and then it kind of gradually comes back down, that's more infiltration. It's where the groundwater is coming up around the pipe, and it's kind of leaching or leaking into the pipe, but it's doing that over days, because the water is staying there, and it's just kind of leaking in.
Towards the sharp spikes.
Yeah, so when you see that sharp spike, that's telling you
That makes
this
sense.
is a good place to go smoke test.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
And again, I can, Miles, I can get some of that 5-year data back for it. And if there's anything else that you need, to certainly run that through staff here will be able to provide anything you need. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was great.
I just want to
Thank you.
commend Miles and staff for this. I know this is something that this council is really behind in doing the study, and I think you guys did an excellent job. And for those here and watching at home, it's no secret that infrastructure is something that, a lot of us know has been a challenge in Belmont with all the growth we've had. So this is going to be a great asset and tool for us to use as kind of a working model going forward, to be able to pull and plug, with different capacity needs that, development's going to have or requests in the future. So thank you guys for this.
I can't take the credit, it's Kevin and Jonathan did a great job working with,
Thank you.
with Revenue.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles. This is there is no action item associated with this. This was information only. But I feel like, and there's a lot to digest, because this is, what was given to us as details that seems is just very high level. So I'm sure there's lots of details. And so I don't know that we need to make decisions tonight. I think we need more information, but it sounds from what we have all been talking about that there is more interest in perhaps going towards the 5-year level of service as opposed to the 2-year level of service, at least having that be our goal for the standard of care. It sounds like there is some low-hanging fruit of smoke tests and CCTV, and that we've been told where it would be a good idea to start with those priority 1 and then into priority 2 areas. So it seems like that perhaps would be the direction.
What I got is if you manage towards the 5-year, but your capital improvements are maybe based on the 2-year, and if you can make some measurable improvements with I&I reduction, as he said, the delta between, in terms of cost, between going to the 2-year to the 5-year management is a lot less. So you could get to the 5-year by maybe spending something on the order of the 2-year.
I would agree with that.
I agree with that, because then you're not chasing your tail. You've
Right.
got like a list that's set, right? Now, stuff will come in and out as needs change, but at least you can set long-term vision planning,
Right.
should be done.
Right, I don't think we want to set like a goal or a level of service like right at this moment to say 5 years. I'm afraid that a 5-year level of service, given that all that is capital improvement planning, and so we pay for those projects out of our rate and fees every single year. And so if you set it at the 5-year level of service and it costs $100 million to do that, and therefore we have to pass that down to the citizens to pay for a level 5 of service, I don't know if we want to do that right now without us like digesting what was just presented and then to figure out.
Yes.
Right, yeah. And
I mean, that's sort of our sense right now, but I think we got to see what's feasible and what's,
correct.
Well, and it's a phased approach too, right? This is something that you set the objective or the goal to, and then you kind of try to work towards that, right? Over years, this won't be done in 4
Right.
years, right? But at least it gives us some action. And the only thing I'd add to that, Jim, is kind of like you said with the low-hanging fruit there. I think we need to set up a policy on these uncapped cleanouts. I think that's a huge issue throughout the city. Sure, it's on the private property, but let's set a policy, because if that's something that's detriment to the overall system, and this is just something that we can just kind of clean up over $4 for probably the expense of the homeowner, right? Set a policy, find someone if they don't fix it. That's
The authority to do that?
maybe something to look into.
Private property. Let's look into it and see if anybody else has an uncapped cleanout
Who would
policy.
fix it? Would it be the city?
I guess it'd be the owners of the property, right? But you're talking.
Well, it's
How
still
do you ensure that
figure
you
that.
fix it correctly?
Well, you just get a new cap and screw it on.
You would think, but.
Yeah. But maybe we look into it, but I think, if that's something in the aggregate, you think about it across the city, that could save, gallons and probably a couple $100,000 of project expenses, that's an easy one.
Is there anything else, Miles, that you think should be taken away from this productive discussion?
I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Okay, just want to because this is good, but, obviously we need to, study it and take action when it's appropriate. And probably I would assume that we want to be using the model not just in connection with Crescent, but with other developments that are on the horizon, so that we have all that information. And I'm thinking of, I know there was one, the hotel that went to the planning board last week is probably one that we'd want to make sure.
Right.
And then the Methodist Church proposal is front and center too. So that's information that's gonna come to us. We probably wanna have as much of that information as possible.
Thinking he developed.
Yeah, but those are, front and center
Yeah.
right now. Like, on our plate the next couple months. So, all right. If there is nothing else, yes, thank you, everyone. That was a very good discussion. We'll move on to B2, and we will talk about mowing. So let's, item B2 is the recommendation to award a lawn maintenance contract. And everyone's leaving. No one wants to talk about lawn mowing.
A lot of interest in sewer and water.
Yes. All right, so Public Works Director Jonathan Wilson is at the podium. And so we will anxiously await what you have to say about the lawn maintenance contract.
All right, thank you, Mayor Virgin and Council. So on March 4th, 2025, the city put out a request for proposal for lawn maintenance for city-owned property and right-of-ways. Pre-bid conference was held on March 19th. We had 2 companies attend. On March 27th, 2025, the bids were due. We did have 3 companies submit bids. Those 3 companies were Dell Landscape and Maintenance Company, JL Lawn and Landscape Incorporated, and Absolute Turf Management. Within the RFP, there were 3 different categories or classes, and each contractor was required to put a bid in for each of those. Staff recommends moving forward with the lowest bidder across all 3 classes, which is JL Lawn and Landscape Incorporated. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So they're the overall low bidder,
Correct.
and they're the low bidder, I think, on 2 of the 3 classes of service. And we're, the goal is to award it to the overall low bidder.
Correct.
Any other questions?
Anything you can tell us about this company and sort of their work for any other municipalities or
We
references?
have not, to my knowledge, the city of Belmont has not worked with them in the past.
Right.
They do work for, I believe, several Walmarts. They also do work for the Stowe YMCA and I believe it's the Warlick YMCA,
Okay.
are some of their bigger contracts that they currently hold. And they are located in Belmont.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I mean, I guess just with your research there, I mean, do you feel pretty comfortable that they're gonna be able to kind of keep up to the demand? Because I know, like, when I was on the HOA for Aberfold, we went through the whole transition of the new landscaping company. We hired a landscaping company that said, we're gonna put our best foot forward, it's gonna be great, everything's gonna look great. They didn't have the men or the people to do it, they didn't have the equipment. And then over the year or 2, it kind of went downhill, and we ended up finding another, or going back, I think, to our original landscaper. So do we feel pretty comfortable that they have the means to take care of what we need them to do?
We have checked some references. We have spoken with the owner on several occasions. They feel comfortable. We feel comfortable in working with them at least for this first year.
And how long is the contract for? 2 years?
I believe 2 years with the option to extend it out another 2 years.
And I believe I read that there were termination for cause and termination for convenience provisions. So if what Alex is discussing were to come to fruition, obviously we would be able to extricate ourselves from the contract.
Yes, sir.
How often are they gonna mow?
It's
Depends
actually
on
on
the
the
class.
schedule. So, yeah, it depends on which class on page 15.
Weekly for most, and then bi-weekly during certain periods of the year, and then quarterly, I think, for class 3, something
Yeah.
like that.
I was impressed by how thorough the RFP was. You guys did a great job with that. That's a sensitive topic sometimes. Make sure common areas are maintained.
Yes.
Especially the cemetery.
Exactly. That's, I wasn't gonna say it specifically, but you're spot on.
No, I just asked that. I mean, I don't know one way or the other, but I know that's something that got us one time, so just something to call out.
It is a possibility. We hope it's not the case.
If there are no other questions, I'd entertain a motion to award the lawn maintenance contract to JL Lawn and Landscaping.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks, Jonathan.
All right, that brings us to agenda item B3, Peninsula Sewer Design Update. And Jonathan, I see you're still at the podium.
Yes, thank you. Also, the design engineer, Mr. Chuck Willis, is in attendance if you have any questions for him. The initial portion of the design was approved back in the fall of 2024. That total amount was for $215,000. It included surveying and then also an evaluation of the existing conditions and just double checking the previous sewer study that was performed to ensure that all of that information is correct and we are designing something that will be capable to handle the growth in South Belmont. What came out of that evaluation was a technical memorandum which was included in your packet, and it confirmed that the existing sanitary sewer infrastructure is undersized for the current growth on the peninsula, and therefore needed to be upgraded. The recommendation would be to replace the existing 8 and 10-inch force main with approximately 22,800 linear feet of 20-inch force main from the Morgan's Branch pump station up to approximately the new Belmont Middle School.
Question, is that one single line that sections of it are 8-inch and sections of it are 10-inch, or is
That's
it two
correct.
parallel? Okay.
The
Because I think,
portion in Morgan's Branch neighborhood is 10-inch,
Yeah.
and then along South Point Road is 8-inch.
okay. Because I think there was some discussion about whether it made more sense to replace that line or something, run another parallel line, right? I guess they kind of determined that was probably.
We would not take the existing line out of the ground with this project.
Okay. Would it remain just
It would remain.
sort of there for reserve use, or,
It could be used in an emergency potentially,
so it'll still be connected, it'll remain connected, but,
through a series of valves, most likely, yes.
yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So.
Do we feel pretty comfortable on the right of way in regards to kind of
The Plant Allen
existing line
section
and
is a
then
little,
kind of
Yeah,
build
that's
the second line?
There are some challenging areas along South Point Road. With the right-of-way, we would more than likely need to acquire additional right-of-way easements. And that would come through the design process, which is what's before you tonight.
And is that, I'm assuming that's incorporated into the estimates, the fact that right-of-way acquisition might be needed?
Yes.
yeah, that's when we talked about doing it in phases.
There is no price for actually the what we would pay the homeowner, the
That's
property
on
owner.
top.
That would be on top of this amount.
And I'm assuming that there's a reason why when the line goes near Plant Allen, that it
I was gonna ask.
goes all the way around like that rather than just straight.
Yes, they were unsuccessful with the original bore in following the road, so they did have to divert it closer to the actual steam plant to get under the canal.
And it's still more cost effective, I suppose, to try to do that now versus taking that roundabout way on where the existing line runs. In other words, you see what I'm saying? I hear what you're saying, they were unsuccessful doing it. I don't know how long ago that was.
Would have been approximately 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, is it out of the question to think that you could go directly across the canal at this point?
There are other options to cross the canal, which we will explore with this design process, yes.
Oh, okay. So this is not kind of the end-all, be-all design yet?
No,
That's what we're looking at.
this is a very preliminary
Yeah.
design. Yes.
Okay.
But it's the full cost for the design.
Yes, this is
Yeah.
the full cost for the design.
Increasing it to what, 1
It would
point?
be a total cost of $1,260,000. The
Mhm.
additional funds that would need to be added is
$45,000.
$1,045,000.
Any additional questions?
No, we gotta do it.
I know that in the section 6 of the, I forget what you call this.
The technical memorandum.
Yeah. Says it's anticipated that construction of the new facilities will be completed in mid-2028. But in the meantime, it suggests that provisions for pumping and hauling wastewater should be made in the event the pump station cannot keep pace with incoming flows. So do we have a process in place?
We do have a process in place. Currently, it is not a sustainable process. We could not continue with that process weeks on end, but there is a process in place. It is more for an emergency situation currently.
And the idea is to use part of the state grant miles for the design piece that we're being asked to approve tonight.
Correct, so, the state has appropriated 10 million, to the city of Belmont, and so what we're asking for tonight is the approval to go to, DEQ, to ask permission to spend 1 million, whatever the amount is, $1,045,000 towards this project. If they give us the approval, at that point, we can turn around and execute the contract with, Willis Engineers. So really tonight is for us to go to DEQ to ask permission to do that.
Did we ever figure out from when we went to the state, remember when John Corbett said something about you have to spend it by X? Did we figure out if that was true or?
It's not true for this is
Okay.
not a SCIF grant, so this is a state appropriation, so there's no end date, as far as I know, for the spend down of this
Okay.
money. That was related to a specific, project for $1 million for the North Belmont Fire Station, I believe, North Belmont Fire Coverage.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's what that,
Thank
there's an expiration for that.
For that one, okay, thank you.
And the goal is to use the remainder of the 10 million for this as well, for the upgrades, is that correct?
Yes, unless there's another priority that comes before this one.
Okay. So the only motion that you're asking for, the only motion that you're asking for today is to approve using the 1 million, allocating just the 1,045,000 for the design to then go to DEQ.
Correct.
I would like to make a suggestion. We would like, or staff would like to request to use the 1,260,000 and reimburse ourselves, that initial 215,000.
So the reason why,
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that.
so we'll formulate a motion for that. So would it be, I guess you need the formal amount, right? The full amount.
I guess the motion would be to approve the city to apply to North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Water Infrastructure, and utilize $1.26
Correct.
million from the state allocation for water and wastewater projects for that purpose.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Jason, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I do just maybe have a question on this one.
Sure.
As it, not as pertains to what we're doing, but so we're looking at it as like completed in 2028. How does that pertain to the existing moratorium and such, right? Should we talk-
They can't pull the first permit until that's done, correct? Until that project is complete.
My understanding is, however, the more long moratorium is, as long as we're making, we can't just sit around indefinitely, but if it's going to take longer, then we can always vote to extend the moratorium.
Right.
So just kind of as a call, maybe something we need to keep on the radar, right? Because we set it for a duration,
When does it?
That's what I'm thinking, 27?
It's a 30-month, moratorium.
From when we approved it in, what was it, October?
Seems like that's May of 27.
I think I've got the moratorium here.
It's, what we're just getting at is we just need to make sure it lines up with the completion
Sure.
of this project.
Yeah.
Is it best to go ahead?
So the.
Well, let's wait, and I think.
Yeah, not right now, but
Yeah.
like,
Yes, we'll
meetings
definitely,
down the road.
we'll definitely keep track of it. The ordinance to adopt the temporary development moratorium was, approved October the 7th, 2024, so 30 months from that date.
I'd wait till we get, it's like a passport, you don't wanna go right up against it, but
I don't disagree, I just trying to put it on the
Yeah.
radar.
March, April 27.
Yeah.
yeah. Because then we'd have a better sense by then, like how things are going. too.
So one other related question, Miles, I think we said once once we start the design for the Peninsula Water and Sewer, or the project that we just got through hearing about, we could also simultaneously start the design work for the road improvements on South Point Road, right? So we said,
For the development agreement, as far as the alignment for the design of Lakeview Farms, is that what you're talking about, Lakeview Farms project versus this project?
Well, the road improvements associated with Lakeview Farms, yeah.
Right.
I thought we said that once we approve the design for the Peninsula Sewer, wastewater project, that we could also begin the design work for the road improvements.
It seems that that's what I recall, is that they would like both go together with design, and that way, when this project, the moratorium project, comes out of the moratorium, that the infrastructure will be complete for Lakeview Farms at that time, but I can bring it back to give you the exact date. I'm kind of looking at Parks now, because I don't really recall how it aligns. I don't want to like state something and be wrong.
Yeah,
Here,
no, if we could just
bring
check
it
into that,
back.
because I
I
know we
think you
all
were right.
get started with that as soon as possible, so
Yeah.
if we could have those track parallel,
Mhm.
that would be ideal. Because the northern end of this project, the Peninsula project we just got through hearing about, ends right there at the middle school, which is kind of where the road improvements began. So
Is
these
this new
ones
pipe
gonna have to
gonna-
line up, together.
Is this new pipe going to account for future widening of South Point Road all the way down?
I would think it probably would go in the same right of way, but not account for like any kind of four-lane future widening, so wherever that existing line lays.
Oh, that's right, we're not taking the whole line out.
Yeah, we're not taking the whole line out, so we would determine like the construction easement and the permanent easement that we would need. But I assume that it would be very close to where the existing line would be. Kind of looking at Chuck Willis right now to see if he has any, but, I mean, I think that comes along with the full, design, so I don't think they're there yet. They hadn't started that design, but they have been surveying the right of way, surveying the existing easements as well. That was part of the first phase of their project.
That leads us to B4 on our agenda, council budget workshop. I believe Kevin Kraus will be walking us through an overview, and then we will get into the details.
Little leaf parts. Bad part.
Did you find any more six-figure errors?
You're in the lead. Hopefully that's it. So, on the budget, the council must approve the budget by June 30th every year, so the clock is ticking, you've got just a couple months left. So fund accounting is what we use. We have three funds: general fund, the water and sewer fund, which is the enterprise fund, and stormwater fund, also an enterprise fund. It involves consensus building on what services should be provided and to what level. So just highlights of the budget, the general fund, there's the total budget this year of $25 million. It's an 11% increase from the prior year. And the budget is balanced based on the same tax rate at 45.5 cents. Included in the budget is a 2% COLA and a 3% merit for our employees, which is the same that we had in place last year. For new employees, there are 8 new positions that were recommended in the fire department and 2 new positions in the police department. One of those police department positions is in code enforcement, which is under the umbrella of the police department. And then for your capital improvement plan, there's $1.2 million that's assigned to funding those projects in excess of $50,000 and have useful lives of more than 1 year. And the last big highlight for general fund is there is a proposed increase to the solid waste fee. Currently it's $7, and that fee is recommended to go to $9.74. And that is to bring the cost of solid waste to bring it into line of 50% funded by your tax dollars and 50% by the fee. That's sort of been the go-to philosophy here, and we reevaluated that this year, and there needs to be an increase. Colors are different here. I don't know what happened to colors. This is not the colors that I use. But, yeah. I'm trying to make it difficult. Trying to make it very difficult, or as difficult as possible. The green, I don't know why, that's just unbelievable. But anyway, those were not the colors at all. Jerry Wright, he saw these not the colors. So you can see that public safety is pretty much about half of the city's general fund budget, and the rest of those departments make up the remaining part. Community development, maybe that's why they got with the good green, they're the lowest at 2%. This is telling that same story. It shows you the amount of the department in the overall budget, but it also compares it to the prior year. So you can see the slight increases in those departments. Streets pretty much about stayed the same. Recreation, slight increase there. We tell the story again here in this one. So you can see, again, the same thing that was on the previous chart, but there's percentages that show the percentage increase from the prior year. Fire at 26, police at 19 were the two leaders there. And this is the department, each department showing how much is made up in personnel versus operations versus capital. And of course, these vary by department. You know, your planning and zoning is always going to be very personnel heavy, whereas streets is more operations, has a lot more outsourcing, professional services, equipment, those types of things. The capital is in green up there. That's their capital. That's the items between 5,000 and 50,000 on a department level, not in the CIP, but their own department capital. So as we go into the CIP, I see what happened now, by the way, Laura, when we imported this, it put it into the old the Belmont slideshow. So that's something new. So there's 1.186 million, 1,186,000, million, sorry, in capital improvement funding. And we'll look at these yet left off the title. You can see that there's it's public safety. It's in white, it's hard to see. Again, I did not that color white.
The white on white, I like
Yeah,
it.
the white on white. The white, good shoe, fresh shoes.
Yeah.
White on white. So, your mom always made you have to, you always got them dirty on the first day.
Absolutely.
So, 36,000 in planning for the North District Public Safety Station. So we got that number from an architect, and that would be planning for both the North District Station as well as an upfit to the Keener Station. So from that, we would get a cost estimate, a lot more detail, a lot more information moving forward, so you can make a better decision on what you want to do. There's 160,000 in patrol vehicle equipment, and the police are leasing their vehicles, and that's the money it costs to upfit each one of those for the upcoming year. And then there's new radios that they need to purchase. I think they're moving to another system again, the 800 megahertz, so they're having to get more radios. This is community enhancement and parks and recreation. You have to believe me. It's $100,000 that is set aside for the Ford Center. So if you choose to move forward with that, we have that broken down into 2 fiscal years, 100 this year and 100 next. We don't know how much it will cost, but that's an estimate. $65,000 for a passenger van for a recreation center. They really want to be able to expand the summer program and some things with children and seniors. This type of van will allow them to not have to have a CDL driver, because that's a big issue.
Yeah, their summer camp is growing and they're struggling to keep up and they need vehicles.
It's limited,
It's
the number that they can
you're exactly right.
bring in. We've looked at renting them, that's maybe an option this year, but it's costly, to rent those. The Rod and Field restroom facility, there's $110,000 included, for that. That's one of those facilities that's prefabricated, you bring it, just kind of drop it down. This is streets department. So what we did, here in the budget is increase the amount to spend this upcoming fiscal year. Normally, you see our POW bill brings in $500,000 a year that the state gives us based on our road mileage. And we would like to do a little bit more than that this year, so what we did is we have a healthy POW bill fund balance, close to $1 million. So this would be budgeting $200,000 from that fund balance and a total of $700,000. So $700,000 in POW bill spending, to resurface streets. And there's $113,000, for pedestrian improvements for Vision Zero. This is the IT stuff. I'm gonna try to explain all these, and that's back in the back cellar back there recording this, so we can bring her out if you need any more information. But it's, you see cabling, the rugged laptops, access control, the badges to get us in and out of the building so we don't have to change the code so often. Camera system at Reed Park, the switch and firewall at the treatment plant, and a STAD system for police department for storage. And then moving into water and sewer. Any questions on general fund before we move into water and sewer?
Any of that IT money going to improve the sound system here?
Not on this part, but we've been getting it a little bit better.
That's part of the DICE project.
I don't want to, it's a four-letter word, isn't it?
Yes, it is. More ways than one.
If there is something that if you would like us to pursue that,
Mm-hmm.
with this, all this CIP, know that this is up to you on how to look through
Yeah.
the rest of the night. And if we want to bump something and move something else up, we can do that.
Because what you got budgeted, I think it was around a little less than 2% of the total CIP projects, right?
Yeah, the total amount is above the
Yeah.
1.18.
1.18.
Yes.
Because I know we talked in our individual meeting about, at some point, we may want, once we get some of the findings back on like the Ford Center and City Hall renovations and what our outlay might be, there, then we can kind of pick off some of these other projects that we really want to, because we've got the room to do it, and still be at a comfortable level, I think, in our general fund. But we also need to get some of these estimates back about what some of these big ticket items are going to be.
What was the timeline on the city hall?
City Hall, we're working with Help Design right now, and I think it's coming up in the next 2 months. Over the summer, I believe, is when we'll have the actual final numbers for construction regulations.
Seems like there were 3 major projects: Ford Center, City Hall, and
An economic development project.
okay.
I think, you mentioned that the budget for general fund is 11% higher than last year. That's last year's starting budget, right? I think the number's a little bit different when you look at the budget as it's subsequently been amended. I think we're on budget amendment like 18 or something.
Yes, this budget is actually less than the budget that we're in currently.
I think it's 9% less.
But there's some ARP money that's included in this one that we're in now. There's some outliers. So that's to try to remove those when you're comparing. So into water and sewer, the budget is balanced at 10.4 million. We're proposing a 10.5% fee increase. We'll talk about that in a moment. And there's $100,000 department, light cleanup, yeah. So this is looking at the
Start a clean out gap.
start a little business.
Yeah.
So you've got the departments looking again, personnel, operations, and capital. Go on from there. This is looking at the increase from the prior year. You see about a 5%, 4.5% increase total in water and sewer. And then here's where we begin to see an issue. So you can see going back to 23-24, we had to use $1.2 million in the reserve, the net position, to balance the budget. So last year, when we had the rate study, everybody agreed to the 8.5% increase. That didn't quite get us there. This was the before we put the fee increase in, it would have got us up to here. Right now, you can see where that red line is. Even with this budget, we still had a gap, small gap. So that should be the 2% will close that gap. I don't know what this is, but it's 2% is what we needed. 1% generates about $80,000 in revenue. And so we were short around $160,000 to balance that budget. So we're recommending the 10.5% increase. What does that mean to a water bill? So the minimum bill that a lot of people do get, that includes the first 2,000 gallons, you would have a $3.68 increase. So the average bill, most people are using around the 4,000 to 5,000 gallon range. So on average, your total increase to a household would be $7.71. And then you're going to see a $1 increase, $1.04 with irrigation. So that's what that 10.5% means. So we wanted to do benchmarking again to see where we stand with others. And then there's a calculator that you can go to, UNC School of Government Water and Sewer Rate Dashboard. If you just Google that, it'll take you to this model that you can mess around with. You can compare us to different ways. What we've done here is compared us to cities in North Carolina that have the same number of utility accounts. That seems to be probably like the best way to compare. You can compare just to within 25 miles of us. You can compare a bunch of different ways, but this is a good way to do so.
This was with, 3,000 to 10,000 was the range?
Yes, so this is comparing, utilities within 3 to 10,000.
Okay.
So you can see for us, even in the bill comparison, we're still pretty low. We're not even midway point on their speedometer there. For that many gallons in one town, it's $165.
Wow.
Everybody's different, how they get water, how much it costs to make it drinkable. And of course your sewer, we're going to be seeing some changes as well. So then you can see like cost recovery. This is a pretty important one. This one here. And we're in the red, so it's obviously showing you, because they keep up with our expenses too each year when our audits are made public. So they have all that information. So it's really showing us that we need to do something here to improve that. Yes.
On your last slide, it was approximately $7 monthly increase for a family. Is that a family of 3?
It depends on how many. It could be 3, 4, 5, but that's about overall in all of our bills. That's about the sweet spot, the average of about gallons used.
Just think about what your current average rate is applied to your number of people in your household. So add $7 on top of that, right? Because your baseline is different from my baseline. Is that a fair way to think about that, Kevin? So let's say that Charlie's is like $100 a month, and let's say mine's like $60 a month. Based off of my household, that's my baseline. So mine's gonna go up to 67, his is gonna go up to 107. Is that how you're kind of saying to apply it?
Well, it would, his would be a little bit more because she's using more water. So it's based on the
Okay,
amount
I
of
see what
water
you're saying.
you're using.
I hear you. Well,
Yeah.
but is that not already accounted for in the baseline there?
Well, it's after the 2,000, so up to 2,000, everybody's charged the same.
Right.
Plus Charlie's got irrigation to maintain his golf course.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out the best way to explain it to someone when they
Right,
ask, like, how does this
That's where I was
impact
going with
me?
it. Yeah, that's where I was going with it.
You can, if we know how many gallons they use, I can give you scenarios for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through 10,000 gallons. You can have it in your back pocket and estimate what they use, and you can tell them roughly.
Yeah,
Do something like that.
I don't know if it's something, something to think about, but, not to go on a tangent here, but just to put out a calculator for the city. And say, hey, if you're interested, residents, come to the city site, get this calculator up, put in what you think, you have the information on your water bill, here's your estimated new. You know what I mean? Because it's the unknown factor sometimes for people. How are they gonna budget for it? Someone on a fixed income, how are they gonna budget for it? So I think if we can provide that, that would be probably pretty prudent. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Like a Lincoln water bill.
Yeah, maybe something as simple as that.
Well, last year we did the water bill insert for the water and sewer rate study, and it showed like, the current rate, the new rate, total bill increase, and it's based on like averages, and this was like.
My next question is how does it fall in line with that?
Yeah, we could create some kind of flyer like we did last year, because this, I think we put this on our landing page on the website.
And we put it out as an insert in our water bills.
Right, yep, and then water bill insert as well, so we could do something like that, we could point people to the School of Government's, website if we wanted to do that, however y'all want us to get the word out.
I like Alex's idea of a
Calculator?
Is that doable?
And we can
Kevin,
tell
here?
you, I don't know, what it's IT, I don't know, because how complicated it would be to make the calculator, because you have to figure out first the first 2,000, right?
There's a lot
And
of
then after that, it's
inputs.
per thousand.
Yeah.
And then once you get, so like mine, we were figuring out mine the other day, right? I had to use like 4,300
There's
gallons.
a lot of inputs that we get kind of confused.
And when you get to the first two is included in that $35, now $38.73. So then I'd use another 2,300. So there's a per thousand rate. And it's, how much per thousand? $10 or something like that? 98 something. So then it's like $8.20 per the next thousand, and $8.20 times the next thousand. And then that 30 gallons hanging out there it's the amount, like per gallon.
We can make it to a chart that does like a 2,000, a 3,000, a 4,000, 5,000.
Yeah, I can figure that out, we can just
Yeah.
put it on there, if you use this many gallons, and you'll be somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
which is.
We can do some.
I think, let's do that. I mean, I think, when I think about this, it's a little bit higher than what we anticipated from last year as we discussed with the schedule over 3 years, I think we were actually some perpetuity, right? But, with costs going up, particularly like senior citizens with fixed income, social security, I need to go ahead and start factoring this into their budgets and stuff, because it's gonna be most impactful for those folks. So if we can provide something kind of soonish to this, that would be great.
And almost anyone, if they live by themselves, and a lot of ones, like just two people, they're gonna be in that minimum bill range, a lot of people are. Single ones for sure, usually are 2,000 or less.
Is this for 2024?
That was last year's.
That was a bunch.
So those proposed rates in there should have been what the current rates are.
Right.
That's
Well, right now it says current rate is 73.49 on this flyer. It says that your new rate for 2024 will be 53.10.
Well, they could, that's for my average, what about the minimum bill?
It doesn't, I don't think it says.
I think we rolled that out when the rate study first came out. So it may be a little bit different than what we would do this year with like the chart, like putting the 2 and the 3 and the 4,000.
Just to Alex's point, I don't think it would be best if, somebody opens their water bill and it's like sticker shock.
Yeah.
I think
Get the word out in advance.
So just to recap, we had approved last year, based on the rate study, the idea that we'd increase 8.5% every year, and that would be sufficient to, what would be the best phrase, make us sustainable.
And able to fund a capital improvement plan.
And as it turned out, in actuality, that 8.5% for this past year was not enough to do that. And so there's an increase more, we were already envisioning an 8.5% increase. This is going to be a 10.5% increase. So it's not as if we're going from 0 to 10.5, we're going from 8.5 to 10.5 this year. Is that correct? And it's our fervent hope and desire that that will be sufficient to make us sustainable and allow us to be able to save for capital projects.
Allows us to save, the $100,000.
So what's the main driver of that 2% from 8.5% to 10.5%?
Just to balance the budget.
Right, but if we said that we're gonna need to do, like our forecasting said that we're gonna need to do 8.5 in perpetuity, why are we now going to 10.5 this year when we just did that last year, is what I'm saying? So what is causing that 2% delta from the 8.5?
Well, one of the things was there was a recommendation in the study to increase all residential rates more and have another fixed rate on top. And it was not told to council that that was gonna be the case. It was gonna be all non-residential, because I don't know if anyone really understood that there was a fixed rate that was supposed to also be added of $16 per residence. And it was too much, so that's why the focus was all on non-residential. And so we let the year happen and monitored, and we've been meeting projections on water, but not quite enough on sewer. So that's the main reason, because the study included an extra $16 per
Did you mean that
customer.
the other way around? You've been meeting your expenses on water, but not, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. Apologize. The fee increases on water, sewer is staying.
It's on water, no, it's on water and sewer.
It's all lumped into.
It's the water goes up and sewer. This is a combined of water and sewer.
Okay, I'm just reading the clause here that says the recommendation is a water fee increase of 10.5%.
That was in the budget message?
Yeah.
In the budget.
And
It's meant to say water and sewer, because it's all inclusive.
Okay.
And just for clarification, if you go back here, so we had to take money out of the general, we had to take money from somewhere else to balance the budget.
2 years.
2 years ago. The
23, 24.
Yes. And obviously the current fiscal year is not yet over, but is the hope and expectation that we do not need to do that at all.
Right, that's definitely the case. We don't ever want to do that. Do know that we've made strides. So think about it. We've come a long way in raising revenue, because we had to take 1.2 from the fund balance, our net position.
Yes.
And now, see, we're not doing that. We're standing on our own. That fund's paying for itself, but it's basically just paying for operations, personnel, and a small amount of capital. As costs continue to rise, we need to continue to monitor. So it's probably a good idea. We have more information now than we did the study. Some more information on Charlotte Water, lots of things. So probably a good idea to redo that, look at our numbers, and see what we need to do moving forward.
Just one more time, can you say that part about the extra $16 that originally was supposed to?
So included in the consultants list, remember they had a long list of recommendations? Some of them were rate changes, and some of them were structural changes. So the rate changes was, of course, putting in that 8.5%. They also recommended charging flat fees for your meter size. Remember? So the larger the meter, the more people pay. So, but if you remember, everything was this only affects non-residential. Sultan didn't mention, we didn't fully understand, but it wasn't said that way. We didn't know that there was this other fee that they had baked in to their financial analysis in that model, right? So when you don't charge that, because we're like, no, there's no way that
That
we
fee
can
was
put this
$16
fee,
per household.
because no, it wasn't approved, it wasn't
So
understood,
they included the fee in their analysis,
In
and
the
we were not
analysis.
actually charging.
and we weren't charging.
That's a big
Tell us.
It's a
number,
big one,
right?
It's a big number.
Something was lost in translation.
It's a big number. But we have met all of our projections in water this year. I mean, we're coming in okay. It's what we're not collecting though is that extra that was gonna go towards capital.
So that we can make some of these improvements.
Yes, yes. So what we will want to do is talk to them about how can we, what do the rates need to be in the future to meet our needs and capital without this huge extra, surcharge for everyone's meter. That's gonna be our goal for next year is to find that out. But our goal here, balancing the budget, not going into the fund balance, is here with the 10.5%. So that's, you're cruising along.
Who was
That's
this?
budget. It was Withers revenue.
But we now anticipate 8.5% next year, right, outside of this.
Continuing,
Okay.
yes, at least, yes, yes.
So it gets us back to that 8.5% trajectory, right?
For some reason, 3 years sticks out to me. Was it 8.5% a year was recommended for 3 years? 5 years. Okay.
We said 3 years to
Do the
possibly
study.
redo the study.
Okay.
Right.
But, okay.
If you think about it in totality, maybe we'll get into this, but like, it's an enterprise fund, right? So we have two plants. We have the water plant, we've got the wastewater treatment plant, right? So eventually the wastewater treatment plant will go into Charlotte Water, so we'll exclude that right now. But if you think of like the water plant, outside of like the headcount, I understand, it goes up, inflation, coal merit stuff, that makes sense. But is there no opportunity to like save money to try to, we're talking about bringing up the fee, but can we not look at expenses and try to bring those down as opposed to just passing this on to the consumer? Have we like what are the stuff we've done to do that? Because that's something I bring up every year. Because you think about the enterprise fund, it's called an enterprise fund because essentially it's a business of the city. It's a business that the city owns. So like, what are we doing to try to bring those expenses down as opposed to just continue passing price increases to the consumer in this instance?
We've met with the department heads and looked to see, what can we cut? Versus what we have to operate. And what what presented in the budget was what, the staff said that these were must-haves to operate. I don't know if you want to add anything, Ron.
Yeah, last year we talked about, buying the chemicals and supplies at the water plant, wastewater treatment plant, and making sure we get the best rate, possible for those. We did that this year. We've looked to make sure that we can get, the best rate. And it's more than water plant and wastewater plant. We have, you just heard it, multiple miles of, water and sewer lines, pump stations, all the things that go along with that. So, costs are not going down for these kind of operations. They're continuing to go up. Plus, we've got $160 million in a CIP, where this year we're not funding $1 or $100,000 of a CIP, and we're still raising the rate by 10.5%. So we're doing the best we can to make sure our costs and what we recommend you all for the expenditures is in line. We're not, go ahead, Jim, but we're not, stacking the deck, we're not inflating anything. These are actual costs.
Maybe too soon, this is a raw subject, but we had an opportunity, we could save storage on fluoride last month, but,
We all, and thinking through the CIP, even though
They
we're
put you back on the couch?
I was gonna say.
the CIP projects that we have listed that are not in this fiscal year. We're doing a lot of CIP projects already. We just had a CIP project, approved for design. We've had, the SCADA system project that you all approved this year. We've got the generators for both the water plant and the water intake. So there's a lot of projects taking place right now, even though you don't see them inside this CIP, in this budget. The ones we just approved for this year will carry over to the next fiscal year. So those are big ticket items that take a long time to get to the point of completion. But I think we're doing good to make sure that, our costs are where they really need to be. We're not, that's the last thing we wanna do is inflate costs so we can charge customers more money to pay for things. So that's not what we're doing.
Right.
I'm not saying that's what you're saying,
No, that's not what I-
but
We could spend more, we've deferred costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've deferred maintenance of the wastewater treatment plant, things aren't moving as quickly as we thought, and that's coming back, so we're having to spend more. Sludge removal. There's, the Public Works Director requested more money, to remove sludge at the water treatment, or water plant, and we had to dial that back. So
even
really,
considering like buying the equipment and operating it ourselves,
Yes.
even looking at
Presses.
that, to see if that's a cheaper option than hiring a contractor, and, yeah, trying to figure out everything possible to make sure our costs are in line.
so really, we need to bring in more money so we can do I&I every year. You ask, do you do I&I? No, it's something that you should, you're always gonna be chasing it, but you should always dedicate money to do some I&I and do that smoke testing, and other things that go along with it. We need to be doing line replacements every year, a little bit, and we have those plans.
So the way to think about this is this getting us more to a realistic approach to run our enterprise fund, because to the point that we transferred funds from general fund and ARPA to inflate kind of our revenue to balance the budget. Obviously, we're taking those factors out. You don't want to do that. That's not how you run kind of the fund, right? Because it's a one-time. So this is just realistic. Because before this, we'd be operating at a deficit. This is to get us out of a deficit and to kind of normalize it, right?
And as we add more users, that will help as well. When you add users, it doesn't create more cost necessarily, because of like a treatment plant, even though we won't have it that much longer, it doesn't matter the users. The more users come in, the better, it's more efficient. So, more users will help as well. And, we're just doing what we gotta do, and down the road, things can change, and you can reduce rates if necessary.
Okay, again, it's not challenging the data, it's just, what's the best explanation that we can give to the people who are gonna be impacted by this, which is everyone in Belmont, right? So how do we talk this through? Because obviously, we have to be good stewards of the city, we need to make sure that the fund is operating at a sustainable level and not at a deficit, but also we have to look at, our family, our friends, our residents that live here and explain why we're doing this, right? Particularly in high inflationary period where everything is going up. Go to the grocery store, go to
Well,
the gas station.
It's nice to be able to identify cost savings from time to time.
It is.
You can find things, oh, we saved $100,000 there, we saved $500,000 here.
Yeah.
But, like you said, in an era where everything continues to go up, plus we have all these CIP needs,
Yeah,
that we've just got this aging infrastructure that we've gotta, pick away at, the low-hanging fruit and try to, make inroads there with our infrastructure, improving that. It's just, that outweighs any cost savings that we might be able to identify, within each department, I think, to a large extent.
I agree. Only other quick, sorry, go ahead, Travis.
Is it fair to say that we're still recovering from those years when we never raised water rates?
I think that's always something, when you don't consistently do that, then you have to pull
We're
the
still
Band-Aid
playing
off.
catch up and trying to.
Yeah, the net position goes down, so your unassigned fund balance is going down.
That
So
was
we're-
another issue.
Right, so we're at that point now where, our net position is very low, and we're really not gonna put anything into it next year either.
You look
Cost
at the
allocation.
CPI too, right? There's only like 2 or 3 major, Jason, you would know, like positions when it actually went down instead of up. Each year you're gonna have inflationary impact, like 2%, 3%. It's just been a lot higher
You don't want
in the past couple of years. So if you hold the rates, and you got 10, 20, 30% inflation and stuff, it's tough. I did just have one more question to Kevin. So if we're doing 3 and 2, COLA and merit, just on kind of the salaries for the water and sewer expense, why is it going up 12%? Is that part of the reallocation of of expenses of people, or what's going on there?
Which
Because
one
we're not
is it?
hiring any
The
people.
water,
The salary line for water and sewer at 12%.
just water and sewer?
Yeah.
We've talked about all those. The water was the main one that I noticed, but
Yeah, I can go there.
Yeah, water treatment, water and sewer.
and stormwater's doing great.
That's a good plug, yeah.
So for existing salaries and benefits, I run reporting out of our payroll software, and it tells me the allocations for each department. And then I apply the 2% COLA, 3% merit to that, in addition to any positions which none are being funded in this fiscal year. But I'm just running off of what the payroll software is telling us is in there.
If you recall, last year too, there was,
The salary study.
You had a salary study, and at the very bottom of the water and sewer budget, you had like a flood line item.
Yeah.
So we had, this year, had to take that flood line item and associate them with each, department.
That's what it is. I keep forgetting about that. No, thank you, Miles, that makes sense. I was just trying to reconcile that, because it should be like 5% total, if you're giving the max everyone, so there's
It was
12.
same for the general fund, we had that flood line item at the bottom, now it's funded in each department.
I'm good with that.
And Kevin addressed some of the cost allocations from water sewer, and moved approximately,
That reduced, 300,000, that reduced, should have reduced.
right, reduced water sewer salaries to move those over to the general fund.
Yeah.
And those are allowable and recommended by local.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, you do, like Miles and you guys, like, you're split between the two funds, so I think it makes sense.
Yeah, it's like,
Wanted to let you all know that Chazo is here as well. So Chazo is going to be here to help you all work through the capital budget and planning. He's here to be able to use the model and show impacts on the fund balance and your debt service based on any decisions or scenarios that you want to throw out. So, just want to mention that. So we just need to, you can do that, I think.
If y'all want,
If you want
to see the model.
well, if we're, are you, I'm
I'm
assuming.
finished with the
Yeah,
presentation.
and stormwater
Any
and water.
question? You got some questions?
Well, one thing I want to talk about, and it might be part of this broader discussion, that, is going back to the general fund and the police department budget and some of the things there that Miles raised. So maybe if you could just give us, because I know there's been some things that have gone on over the year in terms of certain items in the police budget, and certainly we've been apprised of the fact that it appears that other jurisdictions are raising starting salaries for police officers, and how we may need to react and respond to that. So I think that's something we should probably discuss.
Okay, so, inside of your, draft budget, in the memo section, you'll see on like page 3 inside of it, I gave like various scenarios for, adjusting police officer starting pay, and various, salary increases based on that, and how much money it would cost to fund, a starting pay increase, because it's not just the police officer. A starting police officer's pay is a ripple effect to the entire department. So we looked at, increasing a starting salary of $5,000, then increasing the starting salary to $6,000, increasing the starting salary by $7,000, and then showing what the salaries plus benefits would be for each of those various scenarios. And then we also, inside the actual budget itself, we did fund the Advanced Law Enforcement Leadership Programs, Advanced Law Enforcement Officer, ALO certification. So with that certification, you'd have 30 officers that would be eligible for the ALO program, and then you also have 10 officers that would be due a back pay, given that they had started the program this fiscal year. So you've got that amount that's already funded and balanced inside the police department budget. So you've got the ALO funded at 5% increase for those officers. What was not funded was the starting salary increases in any of those amounts. And I also listed that if you wanted to consider increasing, starting salaries. There's a way we can do that, similar to what we did just now, when we could hire a consultant that could come in and help us out with, what those would be. Probably not using the same consultant, but using another consultant. And then I've given you an amount to fund, that consultant inside, your memo. And also, if you wanted to consider, some other kind of plan, what the cost of 1 cent on the tax rate, would be, that's roughly $325,000. So if you were looking to, fund a pay plan or fund, any kind of public safety plan or fund anything for that matter, 1 cent on the tax rate is approximately $325,000. So that's kind of how it's laid out, for you all, and, the ALO program is funded this time.
I mean, it just seems to me that, if other jurisdictions, and I've gone through this in my own employment, and I don't know, maybe any of you all have too, but, there was a time when I got several significant raises in a short period of time because, well, the other firms were doing that, and, it was, well, if we don't, then we'll lose all of our associates to the other firms, and so it just seems like if other jurisdictions are doing that, that's something we need to consider, because we don't want to be losing officers to other jurisdictions. And if they're increasing, then do we need to increase? So I would at least be a proponent of the salary study to, yes, Miles has laid out what a starting salary increase of X amount is, but I don't know what the right number is. We'd just be sort of guessing. So I at least would be in favor of doing the study to see, if this is what's going on in other jurisdictions, what do we need to do to keep up? But that's just my
I don't
opinion.
have a lot of interest in going down the salary study route again right away, since we just got through with one, but I don't know if it's appropriate to give me a call, chief up, because I have some questions about just sort of compensation in general and how that works.
Are
The
there,
department.
are there other municipalities that do that merit base where if you do I forgot what program you just said.
ALO.
Yeah, you get a 5% increase. Are there other municipalities that do that?
I think the city of Belmont is different, that this is an internal, program for Belmont, what the ALO program is. I don't know if any other municipalities do that in the state, but I think in the local area, ALO is
Pretty unique.
pretty
So-
unique, right?
Before you get to that, because I know you and I had a conversation about this, and one of the things that you mentioned to me that was kind of one of the big positive attributes about our department is we have a pretty unique pay structure, right?
Yes.
It's not so much about what officers make when they come here as a starting salary, but there's a lot more opportunity for advancement, certification pay, accreditation pay, that I think you had said was,
Yes,
we may be one of 2 agencies in the state that have something like
yes,
this?
as far as, advancement for, just not only educational things, but incentives for different programs, I would say there's not another agency in the state and municipality who pay for all the things that we pay for advancement, and that's part of why we do the best that we can, and we're great at what we do because of all of those things that allow people to advance. And to Miles' point, there's a master police officer program that a lot of different agencies use, and like the highway patrol has a master trooper program and different things, and it takes a certain amount of time to build up to do all of these different things. There's a lot that goes into it, and we took that and made it even bigger and better, and made a lot of more requirements for all of the things that you have to achieve just to get the 5% raise.
Is that the ALO program, or is that a different?
The ALO.
Okay.
But we have a lot of pay incentives, and some people are catching on, and they're also doing that as well and stepping up the game, and that's just the time and era that we're in, where everyone stepped up and then stepped up again. And there's a pay study, Gastonia PD is doing a pay study right now, and they got the results for it, and because of the county's pay study, they are going back up to the drawing board and redoing their pay study. So it's just the fact that it's so competitive on the market for officers, and it's just not like the officer who's going to stay at one place. If there's a better opportunity and people are paying more, officers are going to leave.
So When they do these pay studies, I mean,
There's no
things,
loyalty in the workforce
Right.
per se.
it's kind of like NIL.
Yeah, that's what Charlie said.
Just like what Jim was talking about when, you know, people were leaving to go other places
Right.
and getting those raises, and that's
Well,
just kind of where we're at.
So, but these pay studies for these different police departments and different municipalities, I'm imagining they don't take into account things like this ALO program, right? Because that's optional, right? They're only taking into account, I'm assuming, what, base pay, bonus, overtime.
I'm not really sure how to
But at the end
answer
of the
that.
day, I mean, that's all part of the comp package that we're approving. So you see what I'm getting at? So it's, if we're doing all these, I don't say all these things, but if we're doing more than what your average municipality does for their police department in total, through these other accreditation pays on top of the, you know, base pay, salary, overtime. But some other municipalities give them a higher starting salary without those advanced accreditation programs in place that would give them those step up, you know, bonuses.
Those are the things, Jason, that you receive after you come to work at a location. But let's say you come to work for me making $50,000 a year, and you go get your 2-year degree, your 4-year degree, you go get your intermediate, your advanced certificate, all those come with incentive pays. But now you've worked towards all of that, and you've built yourself up to this level, right? And then you have another agency who does a pay study, and the pay they're starting people out is $55,000, and where you're
With all of those things, that's
with
what
all
they-
those things, you're not up to 55, and they're starting people out at 55, and that's kind of where we're at with things.
But they don't have, one thing that they don't have, that we do have, a differentiator, is that ALO program, right?
They have they have their own spinoff of that, like a master police officer program, or like the Gastonia PD has a police officer 1, 2, and 3. We just took and called it something different, and then put our own spin on it as far as what we require, because a lot of agencies don't send officers to like to go get like a radar and VASCAR and all the different things in Toxilizer. We require that as an agency, just coming in at base level. And a lot of people, they don't do what we do. We do it across the board for everybody instead of just sending, I'm gonna send Jason to radar, I'm gonna send Miles to Toxilizer. We do it for everybody.
I think that was a disconnect.
We just operate on a higher level.
That's the disconnect for me, is that you're saying, and I agree with that approach, by the way, you're saying a lot of these certifications, if you will, are required here, whereas they may be optional at most
Yes.
other departments.
And some of those play into the ALO. You have to have those. And we've incentivized the educational part. But what we did as a part of the ALO is, say you have a person, and some of those people have retired now from our agency, because we have a lot of new and experienced officers. So say you have an officer who's been a career officer for 25 years, but he has no ambitions of going and getting a 2-year or 4-year degree. With the ALO, those years of experience and all of the different trainings count towards him being able to progress in his career by being able to put in for certain positions and things. So we've taken a lot of factors in building into this program. We think it's a really good program.
So is it a certainty that every officer that comes to work for you is on the path to earning that ALO? Whether they want to or not, it's like there's years of service if nothing else, it's
Yes.
gonna get them there.
Yes, that is a part of what we do, is because we have the required certifications that plays into that. So if the building blocks are there, if they want to finish out the building blocks, the Lego blocks, and make it complete, then that's entirely up to them if they took the initiative. If they don't take the initiative, they don't get the extra pay, which compounds on any COLAs and merits on top of that. And that's what I don't think people understand sometimes. If you take the initiative, we're giving you the building blocks, but it's up to you to complete the house, so to speak. It's a really good program. A lot of other places have these, but they're not called what we call ours, and they're also not as intense for people. So you're not just giving somebody a 5% raise. It takes a long time to be able to get to the end, to building that house, to be complete. It's not something you can do overnight. It's not something you could probably do in a year. It takes a lot of time. The ones who have already completed it have been doing it for a couple of years. So, I mean, it's not something you do overnight.
Where did the 5% come from? Was that just
That's just what we came up with, based on everything all together.
is that standard? Like, if there's another municipality, is that 5% pretty normal? Or is it need to be more? Because the way I see it
Like
is,
master police officer programs, like in Gastonia, we have like 1, 2, and 3, step 1, 2, and 3. their pay incentives, I don't know what the increases are, but I'd say some of those are more than 5%. When you get from PO one to PO three, I'd say it's more than a 5% rate, but I don't have those exact figures with me right now.
It just seems like these pay studies with the police department, like, because of some of the nuances, it's like apples versus oranges versus pears, because some have an ALO program, they have a 5% bonus, and some have whatever their term is for that program, and they pay them 3%. So how do you, these pay studies, I mean, they don't take a lot of it into
I
account.
think the timing with the ALO and the timing with the other stuff as it results, relates to pay are just kind of together now, right? I don't think you should put them in the same box together at this point, even though it's being.
That's the way it is.
You see what I mean? Yes,
I mean, it's all about-
I feel like they're two different things, completely. I feel like the stuff that Miles has presented you with the other stuff as far as the options are different than the ALO. I think it's different. I don't put them eggs in the same basket. It's the only way I can put it standing up here. As far as this budget year.
I feel like raising the starting salary, you're trying to get more people in the door. But doing the certification for salary increases is gonna provide you with a better retention. Yeah, so I don't know if that's.
Let me kind of just.
But it's a double-edged sword with retention, right? You know, you target it for the retention approach, but you also think about it to the level of service that we're providing to the community. By them doing these accreditations, by them doing these trainings,
Becoming a better officer.
we're providing now a better service to the community, right? Is that fair, Chief? So it's one of those two-pronged approaches. But to Jason's point, I see what Jason's saying. When we look at this from a budget perspective, at the end of the day, there's that total line, you know, police and fire. Now, I will say, kind of back to Kevin's point earlier in the presentation, between police and fire, I think we're sitting at 47% of the total general fund. When I took my class, but when I became a newly elected official, generally speaking, rule of thumb, 50% should be associated around is generally the average for police and fire. So we're operating below it. But again, I get what you're saying, Jason, and I get what you're saying. That's where it's hard for us to bring this separate, because when we're looking at it, a total dollar and a total value pertaining to the budget.
And look, I think I speak for all of you guys. Public safety is our number one priority.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure we're taking care of our officers, our fire staff, you know, all of you guys, but at the same time, hopefully you can understand the position we get put in whenever we see, well, Mount Holly's offering $5,000 more, Gastonion's offering $6,000, and we have somebody that compares us to Charlotte. I'm like, why are you comparing us to Charlotte, right?
It's a vicious cycle.
It is.
That happens in the private world as well as the public world in regards to companies, like Jim gave a good example there. The hard part is you know, when does it stop? Maybe it never stops, you know?
I don't think it will. 4 years ago, we led the market as far as comparable agencies in this county. The only agency in the region that paid more than us was CMPD 4 years ago. Now we're at the bottom. We're the only agency in the county who starts out less than us is Stanley PD. So it's like the revolving door at the hospital, and the door's coming back around swinging towards us now.
Paying quarterbacks.
So that's kind of the situation that we're in. I don't know how else to put it.
Is that based off of?
It's just competitive, and I don't think that it's ever going to
It's just
stop.
based off the starting point.
Because of the retention, because of hiring, I can train as many officers up as you want. It'd take me 3 or 4 years, 5 years to train up someone who really knows and understands the job. There's tons of stuff that's really complex, what we have to do and all the certifications that we have to meet for the things that we do to provide a service for the public. And I just don't think that you want to continue to lose officers. And I think that 4-year round door has come back to where we're at now. I don't want the ALO to be confused with any other things that are going on as far as pay raises or increases.
So from your opinion then, just so I understand, you think both is required in regards to
Absolutely.
maintaining,
Both meaning
just
the
to
ALO
make-
and the
That's what I'm saying.
salary increase?
yeah, both.
To continue to maintain the staffing levels that I have now.
To be competitive, essentially.
That's just to retain people, that's not to recruit people. The
Mhm.
recruitment aspect of it is raising the starting pay. What comes with that is raising up salaries for 100%.
We did fund the, sign-on relocation and recruitment, program at 60,000, so, just one more way to, get folks hired up is that we did fund that at 60,000 as well, that line item. And that was not budgeted last year, but this year.
And-
What is that, Tom?
60. The sign-on bonus relocation recruitment, line item at 60,000. And that's a program where I think when you get a new hire, it's a $6,000 bonus.
If an officer comes in and either they're a new recruit or someone who came in from another agency, they get $3,000. As long as they haven't been here and they left and came back, they won't get it within a certain period of time. But if you come in, you get $3,000 when you sign and become an employee. Once you get through your training phase, you get the other $3,000. Another thing that we've done that Miles allowed us to do was also a recruitment bonus for the police officers. If you recruit someone, because getting people to leave from other places takes some work sometimes. If you recruit someone, we give you a $500 bonus to the officer for recruiting another employee.
Employee referral?
Yeah, employee referral is $500. So it's a $6,000 sign-on bonus, and that has helped. We stood up here with 7 new officers, and that did help with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's April, and we have until June.
No, I know,
But,
I know.
yeah,
I'm not making
I mean,
it
it's-
exclusive one way or the other,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
kind of talk through it as a group.
I mean, I'm sort of, it is what it is, it's the way of the world, but I don't, it was great 4 years ago, but if we're at the bottom now, and there's monetary issues and everything, but, at the end of the day, it happens in the private sector, you gotta keep up, and especially when, it's one thing to say quarterbacks or attorneys, there's too many attorneys already, but, it's a different animal entirely with police officers,
You don't want to be at the bottom.
Yeah.
When you bring a new officer on, like, I'm assuming part of that interview process that you kind of lay out what the opportunities for, salary increases and bonuses, like the ALO or maybe some of the other accreditation, like all that's they're made aware of all that up front.
Absolutely. We all the way down to how much your insurance is going to cost and what your expectation is. Everything's explained. We have a very intense training program.
And that's where I kind of I guess for me, I lump it all together. It's just, if I'm using me as an example, if I'm looking for a new opportunity, and let's say I've got 2 job offers, company A, company B, I'm gonna sit down and say, what's the benefits, insurance, what's it gonna cost me, what's the bonuses, what's the, starting pay, salary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm gonna do that for both company A and B. And in the aggregate, one could be better than the other. I'm paying less in insurance in company A than I would be in company B. That's more money in my pocket. That's where
But company B can
I'm
have a
thinking of
higher,
it separately because I work in the private world, so when I'm looking at this stuff, it's a little bit challenging.
even if company B in your example has a higher starting salary.
Correct,
Company
exactly.
A could be.
Company B could have a higher starting
Right.
salary, but I could have better attributes.
And I think that's the argument you were making.
Yeah.
That, if you stay with us long term, you're gonna make more here, everything else being equal, than you will at most other departments.
Absolutely. I mean, what I'm telling you, bar none, we lead the market in the ability to, and graciously because of the city manager allowing us to pay for incentives and things, and those are retention tools and recruitment tools. But there's other things that the people who are in our processes have turned us down because they're talking to the other agencies, and it's two or three agencies at the same time. You'll have someone who's applied with us, but they don't apply with Gastonia and the county at the same time, and sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't because of pay. It just comes
And
down
I'm just looking at that starting pay typically, and that's
what
what
you
you're
can
saying.
pay me, and especially people who have experience in laterals who are gonna move from one agency to another. It really matters because if someone else pays a little bit more, they're going there. It's nothing personal, it's just business, it's family, you have a family to feed, so that's just what it is, and the market's really, I can't tell you, keeping a police officer who has experience is very, very difficult. And the market is so competitive, and people are out here trying to grab your officers up. I have officers I have one in rookie school right now who everybody in the county says is great. And I worry every day that he's gonna get snatched up by someone else who's gonna pay more money or more benefits and stuff, and that's just where we're at, and I think we just need to improve a little bit.
But then it makes you really rethink or think about, not necessarily rethink, the policy we implemented in regards to salary studies being every 3 years, I believe.
Yeah.
Because, again, I think the concern what we brought up, including myself, was that you do this year after year after year after year, we see in this budget what your highest costs are, and it's always going to be associated with people. That's public and private, right? So how do you you want to do the right thing, but you also have to make sure we're maintaining or sustaining our expenditures and not, kind of passing on tons of tax increases to the people, right? So that's the tough part. And I know we did approve a policy in regards to a salary study every 3 years for all departments. But to your point, where I was going to try to get to is when we implemented that a year ago, were we kind of in a good space for our starting salaries and stuff?
Since that time, many agencies that are local have went through more salary studies, or the offset of the term, the 2-year or 3-year term for them came right after ours happened, you see. So
Yeah.
it's like we did that, and that helped. But then you have the agencies that were like right after that year came right after, that have stepped up their game, and those who are stepping up their game are getting the employees.
So every time a municipality has a salary study, everybody else rallies and says, hey.
Absolutely.
step
No,
up.
Everyone wants the results
I
before you have
understand.
one.
But, also kind of from our perspective, I know you, Chief, I know you do. But I was talking to Nelson about this, because I called Nelson in Cramerton, Mayor Cramerton, I said, look, man, I see, we get kind of this communication, because we had to do it, we couldn't hire officers, so I understand that. But then, we get to talking, and I was like, well, then, City of Belmont's gonna go do it. And then he was like, see, that's a problem, so it's almost like we need to get together, kind of on this county-wide with other municipalities.
Well, that would be, if it were in the private sector, that would be price fixing.
Well, yeah.
It'd be
But the thing is,
bias
it's
and
when-
antitrust.
But we're in the public sector.
When those agencies are forced to do that because they're so short-staffed, because you have to maintain that safety level for the public, then they just have, like you said, you have to do it, right? So.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And, there's other agencies I won't speak of that are in the same boat, and,
But let me ask you this, Chief. Is our biggest problem right now retention, or is it hiring new people?
both.
So how many open
I've lost
positions,
over 74 years of experience in police officers since last year.
how many open positions do we have right now in the police department?
We have 7 and 1 custodian.
We have 7, and that does not include the 2 additional positions that are requested in the budget, correct?
That's correct.
Because those aren't approved. So we have 9 open positions theoretically if this budget was to approve today.
Yes, yeah.
Plus the code enforcement officer.
Well, he was
That was
already.
2, 1 officer. and
Yeah,
then
he was
one-
saying 7 plus the 2.
So
is what-
7 plus the 2.
The custodian, Ronnie's
many-
position.
How many
We're doing
open,
interviews currently for that. We should have that shored up very soon.
how many open positions did we have last year? Do you recall? Heading into the budget.
Well,
cycle?
yeah, I mean, that
Well,
would.
you gotta remember, you added 4 positions, and then a DWI enforcement position. So if you include those positions and how you're doing your figures over there, we would be about 3 or 4 officers short from the manpower that we had allocated.
Yeah, because and maybe it's in offline, we'll look at it, but what I was trying to understand is at this point last year, heading into the budget cycle, with the increasing of the salary, the expectation of the increasing of the starting salary,
To answer your question, I believe it was 1 or 2. I lost 1 or 2. I know 1 to Gastonia and maybe 1 right after July. I know we're at least 1 short of them.
and then how long have these 7, I know it probably varies, but on the average, how long have these 7 positions been open, would you say?
It does vary.
We can have a report.
I would like to know the average between the 7 open positions and how long they've been open, because what I'm trying to see is the trend, right? If we can look at trends and say, our starting salary's here, we don't have that many open positions because our starting salary's up here. Now we have 7 open positions, but our starting salary's down here.
So
So
I'm
if
sure
we
there's a correlation.
if there's a correlation, so what I'm trying to get at, if we can get the past couple of years' data on that, we can start trying to look at the trends on this stuff. Does that kind of make sense?
It does.
And then that would be helpful into deciding this, because obviously if you have both a new hiring issue and a retention issue, you also probably want to understand that, I know you shared those figures, but I don't recall off the top of my head the churn that we've had with employment. But if we have both situations, one potentially one police department, but it's just trying to understand and maybe try to start a trend analysis for future council success to try to look back and say, we can point to this to determine future policy, because clearly our 3-year salary study policy has already been thrown out the window and we established that last year.
Well, I think that varies by department.
Maybe,
Not every department is seeing this kind of tit for tat.
that we know
I
of.
think I'd be biased in saying public safety is a little different, but that's just.
I
Yeah.
agree.
You can't look at
It
it
was
from
on
that
a
perspective.
4 year stretch, right, where we went from highest to the lowest, so a 3 year salary study's not that bad.
Yeah, well,
3 years.
Considering we just did one last year.
but I'm saying we just did one last year,
Yeah.
right? So we did the salary study last year and we're already at the position of potentially
Well, it's like, where
implementing
does it, to your point, you said just about everybody did a salary study recently, so it's like, how often are we, because it sounds like every time we do a salary study, it's gonna cause a.
Well, I think maybe the trend analysis might show us something in regards to that, right?
That's not gonna be a surprise.
Yeah. So,
It's like we do a salary study, and we pay more, and then everybody comes here, and then somebody does a salary study, they pay more, everybody goes there.
Yep.
It's just a,
I think it's just tough because
It's a
it's,
cycle of business, I guess.
I mean, do you think the ALO program and others like it within your department? I mean, that's gotta be helping with retention somewhat, right?
It is.
that's where I was getting at with the 5%, would it help if it was more than 5% to increase retention? For these like certifications and salary increase?
because then does that also potentially help you with your open positions? Because again, like I said, when you look at company A and you look at company B, even though we're saying we need to look at it all separately, you still need to look at it in the aggregate, because one or the other, it doesn't matter what your starting base is, one or the other could be more
I would say it's
advantageous.
important to look at, but I'd say the immediate need's not necessarily that.
I think it would fill the gap, because if you have like, you got a 2% COLA and a 3% up to 3% merit right now. And then you have a 5% ALA program, and so you got a starting officer that comes in, he has the potential to get 10%. Well, if the ALO program was 7%, not 5%, you know, you're increasing that pay overall, so maybe that brings you back up to a number that would be comparable to like other municipalities. So, if we can run the numbers at, you know, right now we ran the numbers at 5, because that's what the policy, the proposed policy states, so we could run it at 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it may be, and.
Because you said some of these programs are a year and a half.
It definitely takes someone a couple of years, if not 3 years, to
Yeah,
complete
I feel
ALO. That's why I say in your mind, I think it needs to be separate from the other stuff.
Are there other programs internally that?
We have different incentives. There's a list of incentives I could
Like
definitely.
SRO, I think you get.
SRO is a state mandated, course you have to take to be an SRO, so it's a 5% increase. There's a long list of them.
Yeah,
I think that's what sets us apart from other agencies, that we have those long lists of opportunities as far as educational and incentivized stuff internally to be able to make more money. But we're falling short in areas where I feel like we could do better to maintain and to also bring in new applicants.
you understand our dilemma though.
I understand
That
completely.
it's all coming out of the same pot. So if we have to allocate for, you know, and we want to do it, but if we have to allocate it all, you know, it's a tough balance, because I see your dilemma, because people are looking at what am I going to make day one, right, coming in the door. But we have to budget for all these bonus programs on top of that, whereas you're saying a lot of other municipalities probably don't do that as much, right, but their starting pay is higher.
I understand the mindset of what you're saying, but it don't exactly work like that. My department is very complex. I'd love to sit down and discuss it with you offline, but it just don't, the way your mindset of where you're going with it, it makes sense, but it's not the way it works out on paper, from year to year. Because those incentives, the incentives that you have to get, they come in time. Every one of them takes time.
Sure.
So it's not, you're not coming in the door and having the ability to get a 10 or 15% increase right away within a year just like with the AL logo, all those things you have to go through training, there's a lot of different things that you have to meet before you can even have the opportunity to go and get some of those things.
So I guess how are those things budgeted
Your
for?
intermediate and your advanced certificates takes, training, years of experience,
Right.
education, all those things. It's really complex, Jason.
So maybe this is a Jared question or a Miles question, but all those optional accreditations that come with a bonus, I mean, how do you budget for those? Because it is included, right?
We've gotten better at budgeting for them over the last couple of years through the discussions we've had in the budget sessions, and we've actually started doing,
Because I imagine there's some forecasting, right? You say, hey, I've got 3 guys that are on the SRO program, can we get that included in the budget? I've got, 2. Is that how it works? I mean,
We asked Chief, through the budget process, like, who was eligible for training scenarios, who's eligible for the ALO program? Chief tells us 30 people are eligible for the ALO program, so we plug the numbers based on that. So really, it's like the training and, there's another line in here.
yeah, like for educational, 4-year, 2-year, 4-year degree, or master's degree, we have a list of people who, are currently in college who are possibly gonna get the
you
2.5.
kind of forecast that.
Yeah, we're trying to forecast that, and it's all built into the budget, in the budget meetings that we have. And that process is intense, and we've gotten a whole lot better at budgeting for it.
Offer tuition.
Over the last couple of years, I'll say, yes. I can't speak enough about how good Jared is, about what he does, so it's all, and what Miles has been doing, and as far as tightening the nuts a little bit, making sure everything's included, to make sure that we're on the right track and that we're not having any issues where we have to come do budget amendments. So a lot of that stuff's more in depth, and I thoroughly enjoy the process.
Oh, well, that makes one of us.
I don't have to look at it as a whole like you do, I just look at the fire department, so.
And Chief, just to put it in perspective too, to Charlie's point on the duration of this, Chad put in this you okay, Jim?
Yeah.
Chad put in this the AOL, or the ALO.
ALO.
I know, that's where I was going, the old school email. He put this program and implemented it, right?
Yes.
Because what I'm trying to get at, these first 30, this is the first time employees have been eligible for this program, correct?
This is something that's been a 3-year,
That's what I was trying to get
program.
at. That's what I'm
It's
trying to
been
get
a
at,
3-year
right?
thing that was not funded, and now it's being implemented. Some of the people who are eligible for it now are the people who took the initiative to do it and forecasted and seeing, hey, eventually this is going to get approved, and this is where we're at now. Those are the people who have it, to include myself.
But what I just wanted to call out is like a line item is, this has been a 3-year program is what I'm trying to get
Yes,
at. And this
exactly.
is the first time even one single employee has been eligible for it, and it has been minimally established for 3 years, right?
Yes.
So, to your point, I'm just trying to get to that point you were talking about. It's not just day one, but
Yeah.
again, it's Jason, it's in the total, that's the hard part, it's like to look at
If
it.
you want me to take you back to the budget workshop, I think one of your comments was, Chief, if there's anything else is there anything else you want? That's what your comment was in the workshop, I was here. You said, is there anything else we can do for you? So, I remember that. I'm sitting right back there, the tables are set up differently.
Oh, yeah.
I got a pretty good memory.
No, that's not what I was trying to get at. I'm trying to explain why the 30 employees are now just becoming
Right.
eligible, because it has taken them
We-
3 years to complete a course to mark them eligible to receive the 5%. I'm not saying anything
No,
outside
I
of that.
wasn't either, I was just making a joke.
Yeah.
So, you're exactly right. We did go back to the drawing board and revise the program a couple of times, as well as the period of time where, when he introduced it. We did have to work out some kinks. The name of it was something that took a little while to work out as well.
And these extra accreditations and certificates, you're not just, I'm pulling my experience from the military where if you have an airman that's a good airman, you're gonna send him to some school to get an extra certification. But if you've got an airman who just joined and he's not that good, you're not gonna send him right away. You're gonna try to train him up on the basics first, right? So these certifications are reserved for your best officers, essentially, or is it anybody can?
When you come in the door, you go through a training program. When you get out on the road, you have the opportunity to go to different things like radar and toxilizer and FSST, which do the drunk test out on the road. All these different things. Those are not things that you get incentives for. You don't get paid for those. Those are things we mandated that are included in the AL over here. You have like an intermediate certificate, your advanced certificate, which takes years of training. All these trainings that we send you to set you up for success, not only in the job for the ALO advancement, but also for your career advancement. And so we send these people to all these trainings, but then you have the educational aspect where you get 2.5% for your associates, your bachelor's, and then your master's. So those are things that you incentivize. So if you go and get these and you take that initiative, and some people won't take that initiative, and that's where the ALO comes in. If you have certain years of experience and you go and get this, I mean, when I say a long list of classes that you have to take and do a neighborhood exercise, like called a project, neighborhood portfolio exercise, you have to actually go out and complete a project. Not only do you have to go get all these classes, but you have to do this project too. These are the things, and what we did with the ALO is we took it and twisted it to where you could actually be able to be promoted to different spots in the agency because of all this. That's just that. There's the ALO, and that's how it kind of all plays in together. It's very complex. But then you have things like the SRO position. You have like bilingual people, and you have all of these other things. Like we have people who are traffic officers. This is a necessary evil in the city, right? So you have people who are traffic officers. If you go to the North Carolina Justice Academy and you complete about 500 hours of training, it's a traffic certificate program, then I'll give you a 5% raise because you completed that, because it makes you better at what you do, so you can buy here and provide that service for the public. Same thing with a criminal investigator, a detective. You go get your criminal investigator certificate, which is about the same amount of time. And there's all these different specialties. And while you have that specialty and you're utilizing that specialty, if you're in traffic and need to go to a different assignment, like what you're talking about with an airman or whoever, they go to something different, then you don't get this over here anymore. But if you get this detective certificate program, then you can get that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's very complex.
I got you.
But what we've done is set people up for success, not only because they're going to get their education. We're pushing people to get their education because they get paid more for it. But it also helps when you're wanting to rise up in the agency and get to a different level. You have all of this stuff that's required to do that. And then if you attain the ALO and you're someone who you're really late in your career that's been in Belmont for 25 years and you don't have all of these things, it still gives you the opportunity to put in for a supervisor's position.
Thank you. So I guess that's a subject of continuing discussion.
I do have one more question, and I'm so sorry. I know it's late.
Not too late.
From like a manning perspective, like I know, again, military, you have a certain number of master sergeant slots, and then you've got a certain number of staff sergeant slots. And that determines who gets promoted and that pay raise. Is that an issue in y'all's department where you have a bottleneck of, I'm sorry, I don't know the ranks, but like you've got a bottleneck of, your entry level guys and then your, yeah.
No, that's not an issue at all.
Okay, all right.
So question, not for Jim, not for you, for Miles. So if council was to decide to move forward with a salary study in regards to a department, and I'm not saying we are, I'm just saying in general, I mean, how long does that take, right? We've got to approve a budget by June 30th, right? I don't know how long a salary study would take, because I see where we have, just as examples, and I understand that was for us to put it in comparison to what a tax rate is versus what it would cost to the budget, but we see 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. I don't know if I can comfortably say what's the right number without understanding where everyone else is, which is why we do these salary studies, right? Because if we don't, then we're just throwing something at the wall, and then when someone could say that wasn't enough, or maybe that was too much. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why we recommended a consultant again, not the same consultant, a different consultant.
Yeah.
That's their profession, and they go out to determine what is the starting pay at the police department in the surrounding area, or any other area that we pick, any other municipality that we pick. I think that process would probably take at least 6 months. So to get through the entire salary study, you're pushing into the next fiscal year. And we talked about this as well. Like if you get to the point of knowing what a starting salary may be, and say the average starting salary needs to increase by that $7,000, for example. You're looking at that amount of money in this fiscal year. The budget has already been adopted, your tax rate's already been set.
That's what I was gonna get to, we'd have to do a budget amendment.
You have to do it a budget amendment, and the best way to do it a budget amendment at that point mid-year would be to use the unassigned fund balance. And that's really frowned upon, using the unassigned fund balance to fund operational items. If you continue to do that, your unassigned fund balance continues to go down, operations go up, at some point in the future, you'll need a tax increase. And so even though we're kind of, painting it as, using the salary study to accomplish the goal, it's mid-year. You gotta know that if you hear the results of it and you want to increase salaries, then possibly the next fiscal year, you'll need a tax increase to cover that amount. Or either you go ahead and increase taxes now to cover a certain amount. I hate to say that without knowing the exact amount of money that it comes down.
Well,
So that's
that is-
why that's kind of the reason why it was structured the way it was structured is that, here's, several different options to fund it.
Because that is the quandary. I agree with Alex, but it's,
You wanna do what's right.
Yeah, I wanna do what's right, but I'd just be taking, I don't wanna guess. I wanna have a good idea. Like, I wanna know what's out in the market. And to do that, you need to do the study, and then that leads to all the other issues, so.
And at that point, you'll know what Gastone's salary is, you'll know what Gaston County's
At
salary
least for the
is.
next 3 months.
Yeah,
I mean.
at least until next, until they do their
To me,
next.
it opens
salary.
Pandora's box. I mean,
That's, to your point, like how often are we gonna do that going forward?
But it's, by the same token, and we're all, circling around, but, you don't wanna be at the bottom either.
no, you don't. And then if you do it for one department, then, are you gonna end up needing to do it for others too, or we just have them completed? We offer a sign-on bonus, 6,000.
Yes, sir.
Is that included in the 60,000 you mentioned earlier that?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
that is, it's funded at 60,000.
But now, like when these pay studies come out, are things like that included in the sign-on, like a sign-on bonus?
No.
It's not? So it's just looking at base salaries?
They set parameters at the very beginning, usually you do it for the entire organization, and then you would factor in, all right, do you want to use like years of service outside the organization? Do you want to use certifications? What are the things that you want to do so that it's equitable? When you look at a police officer, you got the same parameters as when you're looking at a streets person. And so you do that across the board, you kind of set it up at the beginning, then you let the consultant go through the process.
So that sign-on bonus applies to anybody, right? They come from another department, if they're a new hire,
But,
No,
Anybody-
if they're-
but that's a
as long as
one-time.
they didn't leave and come back. We had someone
Right.
that left and came back within a certain period of time, I think it's 3 years, they don't get it.
right, but if you're just looking at base pay, and let's say with that 6,000, I think you said it's actually an additional 10,000, it gets them to 60 coming in the door for the first time?
but the bonus is a one-time payment.
No, get it, hang on.
It's not in their salary, it would be like an incentive payment, and so you wouldn't increase the salary, it's a check.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't go into their salary.
But again, these pay studies are not taking any of that into account.
No,
They're just looking at the base salary.
it's not taken.
It's not telling the whole story to me.
Is there a consultant that specializes in first responders with?
That would be it.
We could see
Because like
if
you
there
said, it's
is.
different.
I don't know if
Because
there
I know
is.
it's,
If there
I
is
know
or
it's
not.
different for just, planning and zoning,
Mhm.
you're not having certifications, and I think it's mainly just time and grade, or time and service. But obviously, this is a different
Well,
situation.
most of the consultants that we reach out to are municipal consultants, and so they look at police departments. So I don't know if there's like somebody that specializes in police and fire, or police, or whatever it may be, but most consultants are municipal consultants, so there's a police department associated with that.
All right, I think we've talked about this. I mean, I don't know where we go from here at this point.
It'd be good to have direction, because the next time you see us talking about the budget, it'll be a balanced budget where we lay it down and have the, city clerk that's available for public inspection. There'll be a budget memo associated with it. That's kind of the way the budget calendar's written, is that, the May meeting, that's what it would be. So if we need to fund anything, then, that comes back into, working with Jared and Kevin and First Tryon advisors to help us out, to get to that point. So I request to have direction on if you're considering something for the police.
Question. You mentioned this latest pay study that I think we're only higher than Stanley in the county. Do you know kind of what the range is there right now in the latest study?
Starts.
For the, starting salary. So if we're at 5337, like where is the top paying county municipality at? I mean, I'm assuming that would be Gastonia?
That's actually not, it's Clemson,
Oh,
starting
okay.
to pay $60,000, Clemson.
Okay.
I think they're actually higher than CMPD right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did Cramerton strike gold? Is there like a gold mine somewhere out there?
They were hurting the.
It's called Red.
It's called Red Hawk. Red Hawk neighborhood, yeah. I think my proposal up here, speaking as the police chief, would be to possibly potentially look at picking one of those options that Miles has presented to you, and then doing a pay study on top of that to see if it was correct or not. I don't know if that's the direction you want to do, but I feel like that's the direction that would be the best option for where I'm at specifically right now with manpower and retaining people and also trying to recruit people.
But then and I'm being honest, I'm looking to you for an honest answer on this. Just picking one of these, is it not just like putting my finger, like, you know what I mean? Like, what if we're off, like, vastly one way or the other? I mean, obviously, we're not gonna come back and say, well, we're gonna reduce everyone's pay, we would never do that. I mean, we wanna do what's right, but how can we, like?
I think you'll still be, we've done a lot of figuring on this. There's been a lot of man hours put into this, and I would say you'd probably see that you'd be under instead of over. We've put a lot of time into this, 8 months worth.
Well, if we were at 57 versus, we'd still be under Cramerton. If we added 7 to the starting pay, am I right?
All the stuff that you see is been gone through, and every single employee has been looked at, and what they make versus what they would make. Compression has been looked at. All of the things that you would get in a pay study has been done internally in the agency. And I would say that at this point in time, it'd be the best option from where I stand right now, potentially losing more people between now and July,
What would be the best option?
to pick one of those and do a pay study after. We've looked at it in depth. I would be glad to sit down with anyone of you one-on-one to show you on paper what I'm talking about.
Well, I mean,
If direction is being asked right now, it would be my suggestion that we hold one more budget workshop before May, or before the final one. We've done this in the past a couple years ago where we had multiple of these workshops. I think it would be prudent to do at least one more before the final, and then we can give some type of direction before the final so that we can get this budget approved in a timely manner. That would be my suggestion.
and between now and then maybe have First Tryon run at the 5, 6, and the 7,
Right.
so that we could have,
But I guess what more information might we have then?
well, we know what it would take to do the 5, 6, and 7.
No, we do know that, right, but we know that he can model that for us tonight. I'm saying what more data from the, in terms of market intel, if you will, for other municipalities are we gonna have then that we don't have now? We don't have time to-
I'm just saying for me, I'll be honest, I need more time to think about it.
No, I agree.
I do. I'm not ready to say one way or the other on how I want to do this.
Yeah.
I need more time. I've looked at it. I've talked with Jason and Miles about it, or excuse me, Jason and Miles and Kevin and Jared about it on a phone call, and I appreciate their time to do that. But, I just need a little bit more time on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because I understand what Jason's saying about the other But I'd be more interested in how we play around, like where do we come up with the money and what are the potential, like how does this look like? What does it look like running these different scenarios? And that might, that would be useful to me. And I don't know if we can give direction tonight the way.
I don't think we can. I think it's a special meeting dedicated to just this material,
Yeah.
and we knock it out. I mean, we started at 5, we're at 8.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, I'd be on board with that.
I just think it just needs a little bit more time and discussion from the council together.
All right, that said, so if you're looking at presenting,
Chief, what was your recommendation?
Any of these 3 options plus a salary study.
Did you have one in particularly? I'm just trying to start with a starting point for myself.
That's a good point.
Starting point would be probably this $7,000 option.
Because we're April 21st right now.
yeah,
Plus the salary study.
so it'd have to be sometime next week, eh?
Yeah, because based on the budget calendar, May 5th, city manager present balanced budget to the city council to make available for public inspection, unless you, I guess, amend your budget calendar, and the May 5th meeting could be a topic, and then, I don't know, no, special meeting's probably better than.
I think we need to do a special meeting, because I remember my first year on council, we approved that thing, right at the, deadline to approve it, because there were so many questions going on,
So we're looking at next week?
Yeah.
would be my suggestion. But just solely dedicated to this.
Do we want to do a week from tonight?
Monday the 28th.
Let's see. I think that would work. Yeah, that works for me.
Works
Like
for me.
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
That works.
All right.
Okay.
Both have one more quick question, not police related, but fire related, on a couple of the items that Kevin mentioned about some of the budgeted TIP projects. So the one regarding the design for North Belmont and the main station. Wasn't, I know that was, we were looking at possible renovations for Maine, but were we also talking about the option of potentially looking at a new location as an option too?
Yes.
Is that included in that same 36,000?
Yes. You know, when we talked to the architect, that was one of the things we discussed, was that we didn't know whether to renovate the main station or expand it with the property purchases adjacent to the property where the main station is, or either move it to another location. And so that they said that they could do a quick feasibility on some of the properties that we identified and give us better cost estimates. And so that is included.
Good.
For both of them, both North Belmont and the main station, that we could pick out different properties and they could give us their opinions on how the station may fit and what it may cost to do it.
Okay.
All right, well, we spent a lot of time talking about police. That's an understatement. But we do, as we were, as was mentioned before, we do have first try on here. So is there anything else that we want to walk through in terms of the capital improvements or anything else that we want to discuss?
I don't want this to be a wasted trip for Chazo. I mean,
Yes.
maybe would it be helpful to go ahead and at least just model out those 3 options, just so we know ahead of next Monday? Or?
I think that would be good. That's what I was just thinking, that you have more information to think about between now and then. So if Chazo could model maybe the $7,000 option and then show you if we had to increase the tax rate versus removing a CIP item, how soon we get into the red where we need a tax increase. So I think that'd be a good next step. If not, then we'll do that at the 28th meeting, and we just wasted Chazo's time.
Right.
Let's go ahead and do that, if he's on it.
Yeah,
Okay, I got you. You wanna do that?
Yeah.
You can use the clicker too.
I'll just send those on my house.
Should I bring the microphone over here with me? Just so I can be positioned.
Probably so they can hear
Pull the whole
you.
podium over there.
The clicker's not gonna work, he needs to use the keyboard.
He just needs the audio to feed through the.
Yeah, you can bring the mic up.
Okay.
It's
Oh.
Is it gonna pick up, you bet, you think?
Yeah. It'll pick up. He's
If
just-
not, then Catherine's, mic's over
Oh,
there.
actually, we could do that. It's even better than him having to hold that mic.
Seven and a half hour meeting.
Sounds like it was fun.
Where do you want Chazzo to start?
Let's start with this modeling of the 7,000 as Miles referred to.
What is that, sir?
It's increasing the police starting salary by $7,000.
So is that as simple as just looking at number of officers?
I have no clue, I don't know how the file's built.
We don't know any people.
But I mean, this is gonna be, see, this is what I was thinking, this is gonna be a little bit more than just $7,000, because then we talk about the ripple effect to try to stop that compression issue. It's not just $7,000 at the starting, it's now fix the compression issues that we're gonna have from the $7,000. I don't know if this model can,
Well, it can isolate to show you costs, with assumed salary growth
Uh-huh.
year over year, and plus you inject what's $7,000 per officer, you inject that in there, and then it'll flow through the rest of the model in future years, so you can see what that cost is gonna look like.
but it wouldn't be $7,000 for every officer. It would be $7,000 for officers within, like, starting, which would be open positions, so assume 7, 8, 9, 9, right? That'd be 9 officers, right?
That's all.
Well, but if you're above this starting, you're not gonna necessarily get the big
The
increase,
seven
right?
thousand, yeah.
Yeah.
So
How
seven
does
thousand
it- how
across
does
the
the
board.
compression, how does it work, Kevin, with the formula to do the compression?
This doesn't have do anything with compression, this is adding $7,000 to starting salary, right?
Right, and it
Yes,
moves all salaries to up $7,000.
It does?
All salaries?
That's how we've ran the numbers there. We included every person in the police department, increased all their salaries, because if you increase the starting salary, you
Right.
increase compression across
Right.
everyone. So
Well, what would,
as a quick scenario, that's what we did, was we funded it.
what would a
just
7,000 be for a starting salary based on what percentage? If that's like a 3%, then you just add 3%.
Oh, it's more than that. It's like,
I'm just throwing it out.
So when I talked to Nelson about this, when they did the starting salary to whatever it was, 60K, he told me, I said, well, how are you guys handling the compression component of it? And he said they were factoring a percentage, so if you were above it, there was a certain percent that it would cap at. It wasn't necessarily the full amount that the that the starting salary was going up. So,
I guess that was my understanding of this too. I didn't
that was
realize
my kind of
it was like
understanding.
7,000 across the board. That's not,
Chief?
It's my understanding that they also increase salaries across the board by $10,000 increment to go along with the $60,000 starting pay.
I mean, I don't know, I'm going off of what the mayor Crediton told me, so, I mean, I'm not necessarily trying to make something up. But I
No,
was asking
I'm going
about
by what I was
compression.
told, I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out the best thing we can do here to try to make it happen, but.
well, you should know by now. You're right. We're more likely to make
We're
no
in the
one
wrong,
happy than that.
volunteer organization for that.
I think you gotta do it like a percentage.
You have to.
You just,
So the police
Well, how do we do it with the recent salary study?
The police officer starting salary is like 50,336, and then you plus like 13 and 13.4% probably gets you up to like 57,000 starting salary. So quick math.
If you apply that same percentage across.
Yeah, Jerry can, he's on the real
Although that's gonna be an even bigger number.
Yeah, 15% of the high
fast.
end.
50,336.
To your point, I mean, it would be a cap somewhere.
It was, it said it, I don't have the
Like
policy.
if you've got 10 years in service.
Yeah, 13.5 will get you.
Well, that's something else I guess we can figure out between now and next Monday.
So it's 13.5%.
For the starting salary.
Starting salary.
Chaz is looking for, direction.
Yeah, do you all want me to start with one of the $3, $5, $6, or $7,000?
Yeah.
7.
Let's do 7, let's start at the top.
Give it a suggestion.
This is just incremental salaries. So it looks like under the $7,000 scenario, it would be about $441,000 of additional police-related salaries. And so at present, we have for fiscal 2026 your balanced budget. So there's no addition or withdrawal to fund balance. As Miles alluded to earlier, there's value of pennies about $325,000. So all else equal, if we use $441,000 of additional expenditures, then there's going to be a $441,000 draw on fund balance unless there is some sort of offsetting revenue. And so outside of including larger capital projects, just the capital projects that are within each department, that is going to create a slight budgetary imbalance for the next couple of fiscal years until projected property tax revenues catch up to those additional increases. You all are starting at a very healthy fund balance position at the end of fiscal 2024, but to Miles' earlier point, you certainly don't want to be utilizing unassigned fund balance to cover operational expenditures, because that does create that operational imbalance where if that continues to persist and you start to layer on your capital needs, then there's going to be some budgetary pressure to potentially cause you to have to pull back on expenditures or look at additional revenues required to maintain fund balance levels. And so the picture that I have here right now has the $441,000 associated with the $7,000 increase for police. It has all other budget expenditures as presented right now in the fiscal 2026 preliminary budget. It grows operational expenditures by 3% annually. It grows salaries and benefits outside this police adjustment by 4.5% annually, which is a combination of COLA and merit. And then the large driver on the revenue side is obviously your property tax revenue. We've held that property tax rate flat. We've assumed that you're going to see some development coming online over the next couple of years that'll result in anywhere from 3 to 6% growth in your tax base. So that natural growth, not requiring you all to have to increase taxes. But again, this does not have some of the major capital projects turned on at the moment. I just want to show you all from an operational perspective kind of what this picture looks like if you were to include those additional police salaries. So what this tells us right now is if you didn't fund any large capital projects, you could absorb this within your budget and the natural growth in your revenues would cover that. But obviously, there's these capital projects out there that, if you'd like me, I can go ahead and flip those on and show you what that means for the overall picture, but I wanted to start here first.
What capital projects are checked on right now? None. Can we go to
No,
the,
we have like
There might be
a million,
Chaz, I can show you.
well, it's 1.2, right?
the 1.1.
But those are already checked on, right?
Those are turned on. The larger projects that would require debt financing, so if you can see these first 6 projects here, those have not been turned on yet. So the more minor pay-as-you-go capital projects are going to be year-over-year type stuff. Those are turned on. Those range anywhere, I think, from maybe $500,000 to over $1 million a year. But it's really these big-ticket projects here that are scheduled out over the next 5 or 6 fiscal years that are really going to change the overall picture here.
I see some CIP projects in the back of our budget notebook, like kind of the range is from 25K up to, I don't know, 200, right? Which you total all that up, that's how you get to the $1.1 million, Jared, right?
Say it again,
For budgeted CIP projects?
Just the ones that are in the,
That's,
Right, but those are the ones that, if we wanted to fund something like this without a tax increase, we would have to pull some of those off,
that's
right?
correct.
To account for that.
and they're ongoing, so then it would also deduct that same amount from the next year, and the next year, and the next year.
Right.
Or if you punted it to another year, you'd have to plug it in the future year.
Can we not just, because salaries are in perpetuity, so the increase is in perpetuity, so the answer's not as simple as just taking a hit to the unassigned fund balance in 1 year, right? Because this expense is gonna compound and actually go up by 5% or 4 or 3 and 2, whatever the percent makeup is, right, each year. This, for me, and I guess, kind of just trying to put all the cards on the table on this, each year we do this, somehow we get to the same position when we're talking about capital improvement projects, and then these projects just get pushed because there's this big expense that has popped up. I mean, I don't know, that's why I just need a little bit more time for me personally to try to go through it, weigh the options, recheck with Miles and Jared and Kevin. I mean, call Corky, there's more stuff, I think. Because when you come prepared, I came prepared, I think, I read this, I talked to you guys, I have one thing that I think I'm gonna do, but then it just kind of completely goes out the window, right, by the presentation. So, I don't know, it's just maybe a little bit more frustration there, because when I look at this, we end up in the same position each time, each year.
Well, I think
Past-
the CIP
do we not, Jim?
process-
The past couple of budget cycles, it's the same position. And the next thing we know, one of those, that North District Public Safety Facility gets pushed out more years, right?
Well, there's a way to do something different,
Yeah,
right?
you
Something that,
increase taxes, which you
Yes.
haven't done.
yes.
We decreased them, yeah.
Well,
We decreased them twice and then kept,
Cents.
sustained or kept them flat for.
Mhm.
Chaz, we didn't mean to take away from your presentation.
Yeah, sorry, Chad.
Yeah, so if you'd like, I can kind of turn on these projects and we'll see how the picture changes.
And then, let's see, replace the 2 fires, and don't do the public safety thing. What about city hall repairs? Do you wanna turn that one on or not? It's 1.5 million, do you wanna leave it off or on?
Turn it
City
on.
hall.
Turn it on.
Turn it on. Leave off the parking deck right now. That's all you've got built in right now, I think.
For debt service, yeah.
That for debt. Do you wanna go to, are there any in cash that we need to turn on?
Those are all turned on.
All cash, okay. And so there, a lot of the projects though don't have dollar amounts to them yet. So we do have a lot more projects on like the cash, if you go back there. So there's some projects that don't have costs associated with them yet, I think, right? A few.
Well, not only that, you look at that City Hall renovation, that 1.5 million is a 3-year-old, almost 3 years old, right?
Yeah, I doubt it would be.
Yeah, original shot.
But just with those that you have turned on, we can see where we are.
And then also, where does this calculate the debt ratio that we have? Because we have a
Yeah.
policy and.
Yeah, so we've changed this.
Oh, there it is.
We did reduce, see, the 30% of your fund balance. Remember, last year we had 40.
Yeah.
So, 40 was what was 40 to 50 was recommended by our advisors, but 30 is what you have in your adopted
3%
policy.
is your policy.
The range strict.
Your debt service is 12%.
So what this is showing is where you all are starting from is a position of strength. You have a very high fund balance, which is great. It means you can tap into it to leverage it for future capital projects. But the general trend, whether you're looking at your percentage as a percentage of fund balance, as a percentage of expenditures, or your actual dollar amount, it's a year-over-year decline through the whole forecast period. So it would be a balancing act of, all right, let's leverage some of this built-up fund balance to tackle these capital projects, but we have to recognize that, barring some unforeseen future revenues materializing or expenditures coming in below where we're expecting, there's going to be some year in the future where there has to be an adjustment made to right the ship. One thing, again, that we all are starting from, very high fund balance level, that's great, but with the LGC's oversight, they sometimes will lose sight of the fact that you all are starting from a very high position, and if this picture were to play out year after year, they would more so focus on the fact that fund balance is being drawn down year over year, not from the fact that you started at nearly $20 million at the end of 2024. They're just looking at the year over year change. So that could cause them to come knocking on the door, and there could be we could certainly craft a response or explain to them the rationale for why the fund balance is being drawn down, because we're using it to cover capital projects. But the long and short of it is eventually there's going to be some year in the future where if you were to increase the police salaries, for example, and then try to tackle all the capital projects on your list, the fund balance is going to run out. You're going to start to bump up against your policies, or the dollar amount is going to get too low from a comfort level.
But Judge, in this instance, we're doing both. We're funding capital projects and also funding operational expenses out of the unassigned fund balance, correct? Because essentially with the increase to the police department salary, with the incentives, benefits, all that stuff, that's an operational expense. That's not a one-time capital expenditure, right?
That is correct. You can kind of, maybe
So you have to do a tax increase to
to get you back into an operational, balance or slight surplus year over year. Yes, that would be required.
And that even accounts for revaluation. Obviously, we don't want to touch the growth factors, but that counts for some type of assumption for the reval that would be coming up, right?
That assumes that you're effectively going revenue neutral in each reval. So the growth rate column.
Which is probably safe based off of this past reval and how much it went up, right? I mean, that's probably more of a conservative approach.
Yeah, we would certainly like to start there unless you're coming up on a budget year where you're actually deciding on a reval, and then you can start to play with, all right, we have a number from the county, and what does that mean for us in terms of where do we want to set our property tax rate? But recognizing that the next one is not for 2 fiscal years out, we just want to assume that you're going to stay on the conservative side and just capture your natural growth in your tax base versus trying to go somewhere above revenue neutral.
Yeah.
And we were aggressive on the growth rate in the past. We've wanted to keep it no more than 3,
Well, I don't want to touch it.
but we've raised it here.
To
If you'll
6.
look, we went ahead and, because we have seen 6 to 7
Yeah.
over the last couple of years with all the developments that's happened. So we're hoping that trend continues a little bit with Dale Webb and anything else that's been approved, but then it should start declining, because as you heard tonight, our developable land is drying up as well. So we were aggressive with that 6%.
So I guess one of the main takeaways here so far is that the only way to fund these recurring expenses, whether it's police salaries or any other recurring expense, is through the 3-letter word. All right.
I will look at treasure, but yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right, yep.
And one thing I'll also just want to add, this does not include any assumed future positions. So, those will be additional incremental impacts to operations that would likely need to be funded some way outside of fund balance. And so this effectively assumes that you're keeping your current staff levels the same and just growing your salaries and benefits year over year versus actually adding on new positions.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that those materialize with capital projects or just as a new budget year comes along and you have additional position requests, I would certainly have a negative impact, so to speak, on the model results where it would just be an additional draw on fund balance.
And based on the value of a penny, I guess what you're talking about to get there with, what did we say, 441,000 it would take at the $7,000 raise mark? You're looking at about 1.5 cents,
Yeah, approximately.
47 cents.
That's right.
It's gone up a lot, that tax. 1 cent, I think when I started, like 200 or something. What was it, like 3 years ago? It was,
I think it was in the
Just
2s.
over 200.
yeah. And now we're up to this. Look, I think, one of my suggestions would be, I don't know how y'all feel about this, I think, the $7,000 flat across the board, and maybe that's option whatever, but I would think you cap it, right? If you're above that starting pay, potentially let's look at some scenarios that cap, and maybe the impact is less, and we're still doing something hopefully positive in a manner. Me personally, I can't rationalize or reason with increasing the tax rate to people. I mean, people have had increases here, here, and I wanna do what's right salary-wise, but I just can't, look at someone in the face and say, by the way, I'm taking your water and sewer up, I'm taking this up, I'm taking this up. By the way, I'm also gonna take your taxes up. I just think that is very unfair, in my opinion, so that's my stance on it. But maybe we can find some creative solution in the meantime until this ad hoc session, but that's just my commentary to it.
Well, lots to think about.
Yeah.
I don't suppose there's any scenario where, like you said, through some creative solution, maybe the price tag on that salary increase was, 200,000 instead of 441. Again, it's a recurring expense, but is there any other way to get there other than a tax increase unless you tick off some of these? Again, you don't want to get in the habit of using CIP, budgeted items to fund recurring expenses, so.
Growth, that's, allowing more growth, flying that value per acre growth, high density in certain areas where it's allowed, gives you, the Chronicle Mill, remember we saw how much that contributes to your tax base? So those type of developments, if you didn't want to look at increasing taxes, it's encouraging that high value growth.
But even in the meantime, to get there, you gotta have an interim solution. So do you do that with fund balance, and then we don't wanna do that, right? I mean, that's,
It'd just be reducing the capital until you get there.
yeah.
Is it not a state policy that you can't use operational expenses on the unassigned fund balance, or is that just more guidelines for them?
I don't know if it's a policy, but it's very frowned upon and
Well, I mean, that's how you bankrupt a city, right?
That's not good. Yeah, I would say that's not recommended.
We certainly see jurisdictions balance their budget with appropriation of the fund balance that's above and beyond capital, but they oftentimes will realize throughout the year budgetary savings on the expenditure side or outpace their revenue projections, and so it kind of fixes itself. But when you have to budget to, full employment, for example, you are running the risk that if you do hit your budget, then you are using fund balance for operational needs. So it's a dangerous game. It can be played, but certainly not recommended. I don't think there is a state policy that says you can't do it, because we certainly see jurisdictions do it, but they are just either aware on the back end that they're going to outperform their budget, or they hope that they do it and they end up doing it in reality, and so it's kind of a look back. But if you, for example, were to budget for the $440,000 of police salaries and just hope that you're going to realize operational savings, well, if that doesn't materialize, then come fiscal year end, you're drawing your fund balance for operational needs.
Well, I'm not sure there's anything more just a lot to think
A lot
about.
to do in a week, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything further that we can do or direction that we can give tonight. We just gotta think about it and come back refreshed, and ready to figure it out.
Can I get a copy of this Excel sheet, please? Thank you.
Was
Yeah,
there
so
any-
we can come back and have this exact material available again and just enter the conversation again. That's another week for y'all to think about it. You wanna make a motion, you need to make a motion to call for a special meeting?
Can't we just set a special meeting? I thought that's what.
Can't Jim just call one?
Well, I'm not as all powerful as some people seem to think, but,
I think you ought to put somebody
All right.
motion.
okay.
I'd like to make a motion for a, what would you call it? Like special meeting, Monday the 28th, or
At 5 p.m.
28th at 5 p.m.
at City Works.
at City Works.
All right, motion made by Alex, seconded by Jason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the special meeting's been set, and shall be advertised accordingly.
Yes, sir.
Was there anything else non-police related that we want to walk through at first try on, or, related to capital improvements or anything else?
I'm gonna take this file and just play with it once I get it, to be quite honest.
Okay. there's nothing else for now, would I entertain a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned, 3 hours and 41 minutes.
We did it.